be a great pre-selection.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Planning and Environment Committee 835. It's 9:14 and we will commence proceedings with our full complement of member councillors and a few guests with us today. Good morning to everybody and good morning to directors and managers and all city staff in attendance today. Sorry, I get it in early too, that I'm fairly confident William's already watching, so good morning, William, as well, before the jokes kick in.
Yeah, g'day, mate. How's it going?
Yeah. Councillors, I have no attendance or apologies, no leave of absence. We'll do the confirmation of minutes, so do I have someone that's happy to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor Vorster, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All those in favour? Councillor Gates and Councillor Owen-Jones, you happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? Very good. Councillor Curtis, you don't vote on this one. You're not a member of the... Oh, sorry, we have appointed you to this committee, haven't we?
Yeah.
Oh, my apologies, Councillor Curtis. I forgot you're a fully pledged member of Planning Committee now.
Are you going to accept a vote?
In that case, your vote is accepted and most definitely welcomed. My apologies.
Very generous of you, thank you.
How rude of me. Yes, okay, so that's the committee minutes of the last meeting. Conflict of interest declarations, we have a DCI from Councillor Gates that we'll deal with at 6.2. Committee forward planning schedule, we don't need to worry about, so we'll kick straight into reports and presentations.
Sorry, are we going to vote on my declaration now or at the time?
No, we'll do it at 6.2.
Okay,
Because if it gets opened up, otherwise we'll come back to it. So councillors, as always, all items are starred. I'm fairly confident we'll end up unstarring most of them, but items of interest, Councillor Tozer.
6.3, I've got some questions about.
Councillor Owen-Jones.
What's your... 7.1, I'm assuming, is...
Is that the supplementary?
No, that's 6.7, so 6 point...
no, sorry, I was trying to catch the supplementary.
Okay, so 6.7. So no interest. Councillor Taylor can't make it to committee today, so is there any interest in 6.1 or 6.2 from any committee members? Yeah, so 6.2 for the declaration. Nothing in 6.1. Everyone's happy with 6.4.
Sorry, is 6.1 unstarred, sorry?
Not yet. Yep, so that's 6.1. We're leaving 6.4 starred, and we're leaving 7.1 starred. 6.6 will be unstarred.
So, Chairman, I have a general business item which relates to 6.4 but doesn't have to be dealt with.
Okay.
At that time, it can stay starred.
Yep. So as I read it, just to check, so William, you're interested in 6.7, not 7.1?
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
So, no, 7.1 I'm okay with.
Okay. So that's the only one with a star at this stage, so everyone's happy with 7.1? Okay, so we might get it out the way. So a mover...
Sorry, just on 6.1, could I just... Is that what we're dealing with, sorry?
No, 7.1.
Oh.
It's the only starred item left.
Righto.
Yep. Yep. 6.4, sorry. Yep.
So 6.4.
Okay, here, let me...
Stars.
Yep.
Moved.
So,
Second.
very good. Move Councillor Owen-Jones, second Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? Okay, so 6.4 and 7.1 are out the way. We'll go to 6.1 first. Councillor Vorster, did you have a need for presentation or just a question?
No presentation, but I did want to draw the meeting's attention to page 181 of the agenda, paragraph 5.1.3, the Barcy Lakes Business Centre placemaking opportunities paragraph. Councillors, you may recall that I have made a declarable conflict of interest declaration in the past concerning, I suppose, placemaking initiatives in this precinct. That is because I have a long-time family friend who owns and operates a business in the Barcy Lakes CBD who is an electoral donor as well, and my brother owns a office suite in the CBD. I did make that declaration at the time. Council supported my continuing involvement in the in investment decisions there, but I did want to bring people's attention to that, just in case there was a view that I might need to make a fresh declaration. Okay. Thank you.
So no, there was nothing else, Councillor Vorster? In that case, Patrick, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Moved, Councillor Owen-Jones, second, Councillor Gates. All those in favour of 6.1? That is carried. 6.2, Councillor Gates, your DCOI.
I do. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to acknowledge that I have received donations from the planning consultant, UPS, $1,850 in 2014, $1,850 in 2015, and refunded in full $1,850 in 2016. I have indicated that I would like to remain in the room due to the significance of the project and my experience in the planning capacity.
Thank you, Councillor Gates. Councillor Peter-Young.
Can I pose a question to the councillor through you?
Of course.
Thanks, Chairman. Councillor, have you met with or discussed this proposal with the donor?
Certainly not.
Thank you. Chairman, I'm happy to move a procedural motion that Councillor Gates may participate in the vote because the conflict is of a minor nature and her input is valuable to the outcome in the public interest.
Thank you, Peter.
Second.
We'll just let the words get on the screen. Can we just drop that quickly? So Councillor Peter-Young, you're happy with that? That was your intent?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks.
Very good. And Councillor Owen-Jones, you're happy to second? Still am happy. Very good. So move Councillor Peter-Young, second Councillor Owen-Jones. There'll be a division on this because of the declaration. So all those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Curtis, Councillor Peter-Young, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Vorster. Please note Councillor Gates did not vote. The item at hand, 6.2, councillors, there's an interest in presentation or questions on this one. I did have, Lara, I've got one question, sorry.
So, Chair, given the size of it, do you think that the presentation is maybe worthwhile? I don't have any issues or questions, but I think that it's not an insignificant project and an investment in the city, and I know that Councillor Taylor isn't able to attend.
I tend to agree, Councillor Owen-Jones, that I think given how iconic this site is and how large the project is, I think the presentation would be worthwhile since we've got it ready to go. So when officers are ready.
Thank you, councillors. Through the chair, item 6.2 is a material change of use for multiple dwellings, code assessment, 627 units, food and drink outlet, childcare centre, shop being a neighbourhood store at 162 the Esplanade Surface Paradise. The subject site, you can see on the screen here today, is made up of 4 allotments. It's got 3 frontages and shares 1 common boundary to the south.
I'm so sorry. I just needed to quickly reorientate myself. That intersection with that little island development, is that, what do you call it? The old Red Rooster, Hungry Jack's. Sorry, can I just look up an address on Google Maps for a second?
Do you want me to go? I can go to the next slide. This might help.
So I think previously this had units on it was.
I think the county is a bit further north, but maybe not.
Just bear with me, sorry. Okay, I have an interest and I cannot participate. Could I just bring up a declarable conflict of interest? Sorry.
Okay. Councillors, 5 minutes break while Councillor Vorster gets his DCUI ready, please. So pause the meeting for 5 minutes. Okay, we'll open the meeting back up. Councillor Vorster, you have a declaration to make.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. I've previously made a declaration with respect to this site, but now we're dealing with a markedly different development scheme, so I'm taking the step of making a fresh declaration. The nature of this particular DCOI is that a reasonable person may form the view I have an interest in this matter because my father-in-law lives in a unit adjacent to the subject site and overlooks the proposed development. The name of the related party is John Bond. He's my father-in-law and he's an adjacent property owner, not of the whole unit complex, but just of one unit. And I'm taking the step of voluntarily deciding not to participate in making a decision about the matter, and I will now leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vorster. So as long as there's no one else with any more surprises, we'll let Brandon get on with his presentation.
Thank you, councillors. Through you, Mr Chair. I'll continue at the subject site. So as I was discussing, the subject site's made up of 4 allotments, 3 street frontages and interfaces to the south with high surf apartments. The immediate context includes a number of medium and high-rise developments. These are the 2 nearest, being high surf to the south at 28 stories and 41 stories for Rhapsody to the west. There's a bus stop located within the western frontage of the subject site, and as you can see to the south, about 30 metres, is a light rail station. The local context, the site is within the high-density res zone, at the most northern end of Surfers Paradise. Additionally, the site's within the light rail urban renewal overlay area, the frame area, and situated within the transport hub. It's approximately 550 metres north of the Surfers Paradise Centre. The proposed development here today is for 627 dwellings within 2 towers of 78 and 53 stories. There's 17 food and drink tenancies located at ground level and within the podium, including a childcare centre located at level 5. On the screen are the key development parameters. Here's a typical layout of the basement plan. This is actually basement level 1, and access to this basement is via main beach parade. This level includes all the visitor car parking. This is a typical ground floor plan. As you can see, the ground floor tenancies interfacing with the esplanade to the north, to the east, sorry. It shows all the commercial tenancies, lobbies to each tower, access to the servicing arrangement, which is all on site under the podium, and access to the podium to the north of the esplanade. This is the typical podium plan. As I mentioned, yeah, access to this is via the esplanade. All the residential car parking is located within the podium, and it's sleeved by commercial uses to the north. As you can see here, there's 3 tenancies. The typical tower floor plate is on the screen. It's made up of approximately 6 units per floor plate for each tower, and you can see the southern tower is set back closer to the western boundary, which improves the views, northern views for the high surf development located to the south. The key considerations through the assessment were relating to built form, car parking, density, setbacks and tower separation. Just expanding a bit more on the built form, there's 4 images on the screen here. You can see the transition in the podium design and form. Lodgement was December 21. The changes to the podium design were due to the basement reducing from 9 to 4 levels of basement due to dewatering requirements. So there's obviously more parking above ground now. City officers have taken, I guess, a thorough assessment of the podium itself and are supportive of its design, incorporating a mixture of finishes, textures, and as we go up the podium, it's set back even further from the streetscape. Podium level 1 provides the awnings around the ground level to provide a comfortable pedestrian experience.
In regards to the submissions, which of those images would have the submitters most likely have written in regarding?
Submission, through the chair, submissions or letters of concern received approximately around the July to November when construction actually commenced on site because of a previous approval. So the previous approval that was mentioned prior is underway in the basement construction. So they've got a BA for that, and the basement aligns with the current DA. So that's what caused a lot of submissions to come in at that time. And I've not received any since the updated drawings from April this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, following on for that, we did receive 52 pieces of correspondence, and they related to the key concerns raised on the screen. As this application is code assessment, there's no appeal rights afforded to these submissions. And just in summary, officers are recommending approval subject to conditions of the proposed development. Any further questions?
Brandon, I had a couple just to kick us off. So in looking back through the previous approval and then where the original application for this proposal started, can you just explain to me what changes have occurred in relation to Tower 2 and its separation from the tower next door?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yep. So I'll just go back just so we can see the floor plate. So in terms of this proposal, the original tower, southern tower, was a lot further forward to the esplanade, which has been set back, which has increased the setback to the tower between 22 to 28 metres to high surf. For the podium itself, it ranges between 1 and 8 metres, with the minor encroachments relating to planter beds only.
And I just wanted to check too, so the bus stop that is located at the front of this at the moment, that remains as part of this development?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as you can see on the screen, the bus stop has been integrated within the Port Cochere on the western frontage.
And maybe not a question for you, Brandon, but I was hoping that I'm guessing someone from traffic might be able to explain the unbundled car parking situation to us. Or whoever wants to have a go at it.
I'm happy to have a crack.
Brandon have a crack and then he'll get some assistance if needed.
So, yeah, the Transport Code offers a reduced car dependency within the transport hub area, and these are through travel demand measures. The acceptable outcome within the Transport Code 4.1 talks about bundling of car parking. The term bundling means it's an arrangement where you can have a car park that's purchased separately from the unit. So it's giving the buyers an option to purchase a unit without a car park, should they not require one. There's actually an admin definition within the back of the city plan that explains that. So to the subject site, the applicants propose 556 car parks. Of that, they've chosen to unbundle 30%, which is 167 odd car parks, and 389 are standard. So essentially, if you're a buyer coming in and you didn't want a car park, the 167 can be allocated to a different unit.
If you're happy with the answer.
I am, yeah.
Is there a cap on the number of car parks that an individual unit can acquire?
Through the chair, no, there isn't a cap. So there will be, at minimum, there will be 144 units without a car park.
So 144 without a car park and 167 that are unbundled.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's right. So the applicants proposed 73 tandem arrangements, which require to be allocated to one unit if it's tandem.
Yeah.
And then the proposal is 71 short of the AO provision, but because of the AO4 provision of bundling, we determine it meets the PO, so a travel demand measure.
Councillor Pauline Young.
Thanks, and through the chair, with the proposed childcare centre in here, like it's childcare for, I think, 50 children, is that limited to occupants of the building, or is that actually open to the public?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's not limited to occupants of the building, but I would say it would appeal to those people living within the
Yes,
building.
Yeah, so we could potentially have people outside that building who will want to park somewhere and bring their child in and out.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. The car parking for all visitors is pooled within basement level 1.
Yeah.
So they would need to access basement level 1 or street if you are travelling to the site for the childcare centre.
I would see that as a concern, actually, especially in holiday times and things like that. If you've got childcare and the building's full of, people who are on holidays and that, there's not going to be an excess of car parks, I would imagine, for people to be parking, bringing kids in. So, but I suppose that's up to the building to manage.
Councillors, other questions for officers on this item? In that case, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Gates. So I'll open very quickly on this item, just that this is a very iconic site in our city, and it deserves an iconic building to be built on it. And I have to say that looking at the renders of what is proposed for this site and I think, improvements in the podium levels and the activation that will lead to at street level now, we're absolutely going to get that, an absolutely iconic building for an iconic site. So very happy to support this significant investment in our city today, and see all the additional dwellings that it will bring to our city as well. Councillor Gates, did you have anything to contribute as well?
Oh, Chairman, just to say it's really important that we keep delivering new product in the city, and this is a very important site, and it has some features we haven't actually seen before that I'm sure are going to be a benefit to community. For example, the childcare forming part of the development. And I know from speaking with the officers how hard the applicant has worked with the council officers to make improvements, especially to the podium. And I think it deserves our support.
Councillors, is anyone wishing to speak against this item? Anyone else wishing to speak for the item? In that case, we'll take the vote. So all those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Please note Councillor Vorster is not in the room and did not vote. Yes, thank you, Glenn. Thank you, officers. That is 6.2 dealt with. We'll now move to 6.3. We hope Councillor Vorster enjoyed his short break to ponder his future. Councillors, I think I'm interested in a quick presentation on this one as well, and I'm sure Councillor Tozer is too, so we'll have a presentation from officers. Good morning.
Combined application for a reconfiguring a lot for 81 residential lots and 2 open space lots and new roads. The approval also includes a preliminary approval for 9 dual occupancies. The subject site consists of 2 allotments, being 20 and 32 Wortley Drive, and has a combined frontage of 250 metres and an approximate area of 6 hectares. These figures show the existing site frontage to Wortley Drive. The site is currently cleared and has an undulating topography and is generally sloping down to Wortley Drive. It's located within the emerging community zone, as shown on the screen. It's also located within the Gilston conceptual land use map, and the majority of the site is shown as being a suburban neighbourhood and partially part of the green space network. The applicants propose a subdivision that includes 81 residential lots and 2 open space lots for stormwater detention, A range of lot sizes have been provided, typically between 400 to 750 metres squared. However, some larger lots have been provided. Road connections have also been provided to the existing road to the south, being Dollabird Court, and to the east, where there's an existing approved subdivision, providing a similar outcome to what is proposed. The applicants propose to establish the development in 4 stages as shown on this proposed staging plan. Overall, officers have considered that the development complies with the relevant outcomes of the strategic framework and of the city plan, in that an appropriate density is provided in a form that is consistent with the surrounding development pattern, and as such, officers are recommending approval for the reconfiguring lot component of the development. There's also the preliminary approval component for dual occupancies, which officers are recommending to refuse. The reason for this is this plan is extensive information that's been provided for this, and this preliminary approval isn't a request to vary the city plan, but it doesn't really afford the applicant any further abilities. It still requires that an impact assessable application for dual occupancies would be required once this approval is undertaken. So on that basis, for the lack of information, officers are recommending that this component be refused. Were there any questions?
Councillor Tozer, questions?
Thanks. And also, just want to acknowledge that this site already has an existing approval on it for a shops and I think a 38 lot body corporate type subdivision as well. It wasn't in the report, but unless maybe you do have it?
Yeah, I should have that. No, that's
yeah.
approval, yeah.
So that was approved do you remember when?
Through the chair, it was approved in 2016.
Yeah, cool. All right, cool, excellent. So I've just got a list of just questions that are a little bit informed by quite a lot of community feedback. Gilston has a really active Facebook page, and we've tried to have a pretty open and transparent dialogue about this process for some time, and some of the people in the community have raised some questions. So some of the questions I ask you today, I probably know the answers to, but I think it's really important that we have a public record that kind of addresses some of those Facebook queries, so I can actually refer people to the YouTube video and say, hey, this is what the officer said about this, and that helps me and helps the community understand the interface between our planning scheme and the state planning provisions. So I'm going to start with a question about the area to the south. So the connection proposes a road in this development that connects to Dollabird Court. Now, Dollabird Court has a road width of about 5.2 metres, and this development, I was provided some advice saying most of the roads are 7.5 metres. Could you help me understand how, when those roads go from a 7.5 width to a 5.5 width, how that looks for the community? Sorry, through the chair, and it doesn't have to be to you, it can be to Roger or someone else. So.
Through you, Mr Chair, the land development guidelines over the years have changed.
Yes.
And currently the road width is the whole road profile is 16.5 metres with a carriageway of 7.5 metres. That ties in with Queensland streets. The Dollabird Court and that subdivision to the rear or the south, that was constructed at a time where the LGGs had a lesser requirement. So Dollabird Court has a road profile of 14 metres with a carriageway of around 5.5. This proposal will provide 7.5 within the whole subdivision, except for that small stretch that links up with Dollabird Court. That will be 5.5 for around 14 metres in length. Our reasoning for supporting that is that there's a drainage park on one side of it, and it's very unlikely that you'll actually get 2 cars parking within that 5.5 carriageway. So in our opinion, appliances or rubbish trucks will still be able to pass through there. That's why officers are supporting that.
So I've got 2 follow-up questions that relate to that. First, the question relates to the stormwater basin. So the area where the stormwater basin is adjacent, that Dollabird Court connection, is high land, and then Dollabird Court is lower land. In what way will there be mechanisms to stop that stormwater basin from overflowing and then flowing into the lower land where the established residents are? How's that going to work?
Through the chair, the devil's in the detail there. There'll be operational works that require compliance with the LDG with regard to outlets, ensuring that that doesn't happen. We don't have that detail at hand, Councillor Tozer.
That's all right. Okay, cool. But the basin itself will operate such that there will be no inappropriate impact on stormwater flowing from that site downstream into the established properties.
Through the chair, correct, that the devil in the detail will be at the operational work stage. It's conditioned, it will happen.
Yep, great. So part two of my question that relates to this interface, this connection, is that quite a number of the feedback pieces we got and some of the objections talked about objecting to that connection on the basis that it's already a quiet cul-de-sac, and also acknowledging that there is a street that just dead-end street finishes there. It's not a cul-de-sac, not a finished cul-de-sac, it's just a road that, any reasonable person moving into that street would probably quite fairly have expected that the road would continue eventually. But it seems like it isn't actually an important connection, given that it's a 5.5 metre width, there's actually a stormwater basin on it. There doesn't seem like any real urban planning reasons why that connection should occur. Could you give me some help about that? Help me understand why that connection should be there.
A few years ago, through the chair, a few years ago, state government introduced walkable neighbourhoods as part of their planning policy. It's about promoting active walkability through new subdivisions. It's also an important subdivision concept to actually have connectivity between subdivisions. So we're not just limited to one access in and one access out, that there are options in case of emergencies. So even though we don't think this will be heavily used by a lot of residents, because most will use Worley Drive and get onto Gilston Road, but it is sound planning and subdivision principles to have a range of different options for people to move around subdivisions.
Yeah, so I think the concern wasn't necessarily pedestrian. I think everyone expected there should be a pedestrian connection, but I think the vehicle connection is the issue there. And some of the issues that were raised were actually the interface between, I think it's called Fairy Wren Court and Peter Mills, which is the southern exit onto the broader thoroughfares. When we did the traffic study, did they do some analysis of that, like the likely increase in traffic and whether any improvements needed to be made to Peter Mills Drive, the intersection with Peter Mills and Fairy Wren?
No.
Through the chair, I understand that most of the traffic impact assessment was in relation to Worley Drive and the intersection up the top there, not
the Gilston Road intersection. Yeah,
and that's right. So, and that was seen to be operating, well within capacity.
Yes.
I think generally the amount of traffic that this development is likely to generate was not going to impact on the design standards of that particular existing Fairy Wren road network.
Yeah, that's all right. That's a good answer. I just want to raise, I do have some reservations about that intersection. I've had some complaints where traffic engineers from the traffic department, not through planning, have indicated that the Fairy Wren Peter Mills connection is safe and excellent, but they're doing that in the context of current traffic and a quiet cul-de-sac as opposed to a through road. So I'll revisit that separately with them and see if we can get some improvements on that Peter Mills Fairy Wren intersection. But you've done a really good segue onto the Gilston Road. Some of the members of the community raised some concerns about the traffic impact or the increase in traffic that's expected from this development and its impact on the roundabout at Gilston Road. And they raise it in the context of multiple bus stops being nearby. We've just delivered a $6 million $4 million pathway that goes down Gilston Road. But what stopped us from imposing on this developer an obligation to deliver a traffic light solution instead of a roundabout solution at Gilston Road?
Through the chair, just looking at on page 576 of the agenda, there was some excerpts from the analysis that our Transport Assessment Branch provided us in relation to their assessment of the transport traffic impact assessment report. And out of that, it was identified that intersection is working well with ample spare capacity through to 2033, and they're not anticipating that beyond that, only sort of minor delay. So from that, it was a case of the current situation, even with this development into the system, is still going to have sufficient capacity or still work within the capacity of that roundabout, such that there was no suggestion that traffic lights would have been needed.
Okay, cool. So part two of my question in relation to that is that I accept that traffic lights aren't required. Because we've just delivered this pathway that goes down, is there a centre island on Worley Drive that means that a pedestrian can move from the northern side of the intersection to the southern side of the intersection without having to cross both incoming and outgoing traffic? And would that be considered a reasonable condition, like a small centre refuge for a pedestrian on that road? Is that a reasonable? Would that be considered a reasonable condition?
Through you, Mr Chair, are you talking about outside of the development site?
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that because there's an increase in traffic and because council's delivered the pathway along that north to south, would it be a reasonable condition on this developer, given that increase in, there's 81 lots, and I'm assuming that'll be somewhere in the vicinity of 120 cars, maybe 150 cars. Would it be a reasonable condition to have a centre refuge just on that? It seems like a very simple thing, straightforward. Is that reasonable or not reasonable? That means a pedestrian would only have to go, one lane and then stop, and then they could go a second lane.
Through you, Mr Chair, we've discussed this with our traffic engineers. They don't think it is needed because of the amount of people that are likely to be traversing over Worley Drive, but we have conditioned a pedestrian crossing, which is a defined crossing space that we think is in a safe location for people to walk across as a compromise.
Could you point out where that is? Are you talking about is it Windaradine Reserve?
It's through the Chair, yes, that's correct. There isn't a specific location for it, because obviously there will be some traffic modelling analysis to work out exactly where that needs to be.
Yes.
But the condition requires it to be generally in the vicinity of that crossing. So you'll see Park Lot 900 just to the north of Worley Drive, which is Windaradine, I think, Park Reserve, if I pronounce it right. We're officer of the view that that's probably the most likely destination on a number of accounts, because this site also doesn't have active park land within it. It wasn't mapped as requiring trunk infrastructure for open space. It's not. It doesn't achieve 100 lots, which is the threshold for providing open space, active open space within the development. So with that park lot, which is about 6,000 or so square metres, it's got playground equipment plus sort of active open space areas you're probably well aware of. We officer of the view that that's probably a likely destination for a lot of residents sort of circulating and walking outside of this development. So
like mums and dads taking their kids to the park.
Precisely. So there is a crossing that has been, and I think that's condition 21. Yeah, so that talks about a crossing in that general location, but the specifics of it, so that's probably around between, say, proposed lots 1 and 4, somewhere around there, or wherever the traffic analysis.
And they'll be able to work that out. So the traffic analysis will come in, they'll recommend where that is. Now, if that's condition 21, is it required that they would put a light so that's lit? So even in the early evening or in the early morning, if someone were crossing that to go for a run, would it be lit?
Again, through the Chair, condition 21 doesn't specifically say it. Within some of those various Australian standards, there is, when you read through the documents, it is sort of implied that lighting is to be, should be provided, but acknowledge that the condition doesn't explicitly say it. So maybe for clarity,
we could add a word about lights.
Something could be added within there.
I'm not on this committee, so I can't
another light item, Roman numeral 4 or something within part A there. But otherwise, there is, I guess, within those other documents that are referenced within that condition.
Yeah,
it's
that'd be great
if
we could add that. Some words there, I think you might have some words about that. So that's great. This is some we prepared earlier.
Oh, how many councillors does it take to screw in a light bulb?
One, but it's got a 1 piece.
Okay, so that's going in there. So the last question I have actually relates to the lot sizes. And it's been, you would have seen in the submissions and the objections how frustrated people were because the clum that you referred to before talks about larger lots on sloping sites. So the conceptual land use map, the clum for Gilston, says larger lots on sloping sites. And looking at this 81 lot subdivision where more than 50% of the lots are under 450 square metres, and I think it's 80% of the lots are under 550 square metres. Can you help me understand how you've justified larger lots on sloping sites, which is in the clum, but we have effectively 81 lots where the average lot size is closer to 500, and quite a number of them, 50%, are lower than 450?
Sure. Through the chair to the councillor, you're correct, that's the clum up on the screen, and that note there says suburban neighbourhood accommodating large lots on sloping sites. So two parts to this. Within the framework for emerging communities, it provides a density range. So for a site like this, it's 15 to 25 dwellings per hectare. So not including the dual occupancies, they're providing 17.5-ish dwellings per hectare. So we considered it complies with that component of the framework. And also in the context of the clum as a whole, we considered that this wasn't one of the sites that it has the most slope, so it's considered more appropriate, and the constraints have been appropriately managed through earthworks and retaining walls.
So I think I hear what you're saying, but I'm just trying to justify this idea of how the word larger lots isn't defined in any planning material, both at the state and the local level, but I think small lot is. Can you help me understand what a small lot is?
Through the chair, a small lot is defined as something 400 square metres or less, so a larger lot is not. I'd just like to point out that the planning scheme, as Nathan has said, has two ways of expressing what larger lots are, or lot size expectations, and one is the actual square meterage, but also, as Nathan has said, that the city plan looks at it as a broad hectare approach. And as Nathan also said, the expectation is 15 to 25 dwellings per hectare. This application's at the lower end of those expectations at just over 17 dwellings per hectare. So you could actually argue that it's almost undercooked in relation to our hectare approach to what lot sizes are. Also, yes, there are some minute steep parts to this site, but this site overall is not steep sloping, in our opinion, overall, compared to some of the other lots within the area. So that's why we've emphasised that it is appropriate to have lot sizes of the proposed size, because many of the lots won't have significant slopes.
Right, so because the clum recognises that Gilston is more slopey, you're linking that directly to this idea of larger lots, and because this site isn't as slopey, it enables us to interpret, or it doesn't compel us to, but enables us to interpret this idea of larger lots as 400 or bigger.
Yeah. Through the chair, the original intent of linking lot size to slope was that if you have a very small site and it's heavily constrained with a slope, you can have massive retaining walls or massive engineered outcomes to get an appropriate pad for a dwelling. So in our opinion, the retaining walls, as a result of all the lots, are actually acceptable and not overly done. In our opinion, that's why the lots proposed are actually acceptable.
Yeah, okay. I think there's a misunderstanding from the community, and probably part of that is how we describe some of this language in our planning scheme. This idea of larger lots on sloping sites in the clum is it's confusing to people. And I appreciate you've given us a cogent response now, but people's expectations of larger lots are not 400 square metre lots, and the fact that 76% of this development has lots under 550, which is that's 3/4 of it, less than 550. And I appreciate we need to deliver this
Any
sort of
more
stuff.
questions, Councillor Tozer, before we enter debate?
Yeah, of course. The last question I have is actually about that. None of the slides or in the report showed what you just talked about, this idea of retaining walls. So because of the way the slope of this site interfaces with the other site, could you show us some of the cross sections where the retaining wall connects with the established sites nearby, and what's that going to look like from a fencing point of view? So help me understand what that looks like.
Through the chair to the councillor, this shows the retaining walls. It's kind of a little bit hard to see. The purple shows the retaining walls. So generally where it's adjacent to the existing properties to the south and to the west, it's just a single maximum height 1.5 metre retaining wall. Down to the southeast corner, there is a small section where it is a tiered, where the tiers are max 1.5 metres in height. and a detailed section. These are engineering drawings, so they're kind of a little bit hard to actually see, but it just kind of shows the general interface, showing at where it's a max 1.5 metres, the footings are set 50 mil off the boundary, so the actual retaining wall would be slightly more stepped in.
So if you just go back to the previous slide, all the houses to the left of that are established and all the houses to the south are established. The north is a road.
Yep.
So when someone who lives to the left or my left of that development looks at this development, they're going to see, are they going to see a 1.5 metre retaining wall plus a 1.8 metre fence? Is that what they're going to see? Yeah, what are they going to see?
Through the chair, that's most likely the outcome, yes. 1.5 is the maximum. It varies between, say, 1.2 and 1.5. I mean, not just not a big difference, but up to 1.5, that's correct. So because of the location of the retaining walls on those boundaries, there isn't really, in our view, any benefit to asking them to landscape the other side, because effectively, for all intents and purposes, you're going to be landscaping the existing residence, although the retaining walls are set within the site, nobody within the new lot is really going to have practical access to get over the other side to maintain any vegetation that's there. So in some respects, in our view, it's a case of, yes, it'll be a 1.5 metre high retaining wall at maximum, and then the fence on top of that. I guess the owners of the new lot, in some respects, they'll probably gain themselves a little bit of land technically, which if they wish, they could probably plant out. But we just don't want to, because if we require the applicant to landscape, say set the retaining wall in, say 600 mil, so you could get a landscape edge, it'll, in all intents and purposes, end up being it won't be on the neighbours, on the existing lot, but in practical terms, it'll seem as though it is, because the people in the new lot won't have any way of getting over to maintain it.
Okay, so I'm just going to wrestle with this a little bit. The established lots to the west and to the south,
Yep.
They already have back fences. Like, there is a property boundary with a fence on it. Currently, they've got 1.8 metre fences there. And so what you're proposing is that after the fences that already exist, there's going to be some sort of gap. Then there's going to be an up to 1.5 metre retaining wall, and then there's going to be up to 1.8 metre fence. Am I reading that correctly? So there's like this weird gap between the back fence at the top of the retaining wall for the new properties. Who's going to maintain that gap? Like these guys already have back fences.
Can I contribute at that point? I have this situation at Coomera in a couple of very, very early development applications, and I can tell you who maintains it. No one.
Right.
Absolutely no one maintains it, and you end up with very high weeds and muck and grass growing up that is of great concern to the community.
So I'm trying to think of how I can practically manage this. So all these people live in this place right now, like the Western and the South, they already live here. And what is a reasonable condition that we can impose to make sure that that section between the back fence at the top of the retaining wall and the back fence at the bottom of the retaining wall naturally is looked after? What would be a reasonable condition that we'd normally impose on a development like this?
Through you, Mr Chair, it is challenging because the land development guidelines require retaining walls to be set back from the boundary. So that's why you will get this outcome, and it does happen. I suppose to have a pragmatic solution to that, we could look at stepping the retaining wall or fence into the site a little more, so you actually have more than just a small gap between the two fences. Bearing in mind these lots are not huge, so we don't want to eat up too much land, but a suggestion moving forward, Councillor Tozer, would be to just increase the setback a little more.
So what I'm trying to achieve is there's not dead space that no one looks at because it's out the back of someone's fence. Because what happens when we have that sort of dead space, particularly at the bottom of a retaining wall, which I'm assuming will have some sort of drainage solution at the bottom of it, it'll be soggy and wet, it'll be a mosquito issue, and it'll be not nice to look at. So to me, that does need to be solved. I didn't see it in the conditions, but I think there is a practical solution. Surely we can come up with a practical solution for that dead space.
So if you remove the bottom fence, effectively those existing properties have gained space up to the bottom of the wall?
Correct, but the technical issue with that is that if their little kid jumps up onto that retaining wall and jumps off and hurts himself, it's technically not on their property, and so it wouldn't be insured. These are all young families moving into this space. We have to come up with a suitable solution. It's not impractical. Well, surely we can do something, but sometimes we look at this reconfiguration of a lot plan and we forget that everyone who already exists in the surrounding lots actually already have fences. They're already there. So whether it's a vegetated solution that is relatively self-managing or whether it's some sort of alternative solution that I'm not a town planner, I can't come up with, then I think there needs to be something in that space.
Councillor Gates, were you looking to contribute at that point?
Well, I was going to ask the question whether the retaining walls were on privately owned land or council land at this point. And so there's no point having a fence inside that, because I've just got a response right now from officers where a whole area along Reserve Road has the fence, and this is a very prominent road in the north.
He's talking about the private properties, not the road interface.
No, but there are the fence lines, and then there's a road interface that belongs to the private properties. But as if they're going to walk all the way around a number of streets to get to it to maintain it.
And technically have to cross through.
They're not going to do it. And the same thing is on Foxwell Road out at Coomera, where fence lines have been put inside the individual property boundaries, leaving a landscape condition on the outside of their fence, but it's on their private property and no one maintains it. And then the complaints roll in about the unsightliness of the overgrown space, and our officers can't address it because we don't own the land, and the residents don't think it's their land. They think their land ends at their boundary fence, and it doesn't.
So, yeah,
It's a problem.
I'm not opposed to the development. In principle, I understand the justification you've made for approval seems sound. I don't think the state planning provisions led us to knock it back. Even if it did get refused and we took it to the Planning Environment Court, I'm sure the state planning provisions would ultimately get us in all sorts of strife there. But I think this is a solvable problem. What is the problem? What is the solution? How many centimetres do we have? And what's a solution that can help us adequately vegetate and draw moisture out of that space? Because if it is just left as it is, it will just be a drain, a private drain, that will seep into the existing established backyards of the residents that have been established there for probably a decade.
So proposed action on this, because we're not going to come up with something on the fly here today to solve that. So we have until full council for Councillor Tozer to work with officers on what that might look like.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to come up with something that isn't going to work. So let's take that time and further conversations can happen about that specific point. And then if there is a change or a condition to be made, it can be made at full council. Are you happy with that approach, Councillor Tozer?
And honestly, that's all my questions at the moment. I feel like thank you for being so gracious with me to put on the public record some of those answers in relation to how the state legislation interfaces with council. But if we can come up before full council a solution there, I'm sure, we can have a look at it.
Councillor Owen-Jones.
So just in regards to stage 4, which is the house lot, did we have the benefit of seeing any overlay maps of what the future might look for the street layout if that was to be subdivided at a future point in time?
Through the chair to the councillor, Roger's just passing over a very crude mock-up that we'd done just for curiosity.
So lot 74. So lot 74 is formalised only if stage 4 is developed, or is it formalised as part of this application?
Through the chair to the council, it will only be formalised in stage 4.
Okay, so it will be ultimately the I'm going to say northern tail of that slants back gets truncated in order to facilitate a future road layout?
Through the chair, potentially, for all intents and purposes, the large lot with the existing house is basically a balanced lot for all intents and purposes.
But is 74 also part of that balanced lot, or does it get approved now? And if it gets approved now, do we need to truncate it to enable a future road to be established?
Through the chair to the councillor, if the applicant had proposed that, most likely it would, but it would be dependent on their future subdivision layout if that were to occur, but they haven't proposed.
And I accept the applicant can keep the house, the large house lot and all of that. I suppose I was particularly interested in whether or not there would be any unforeseen challenges in the future with a zigzag type street entry coming into that stage 4, and this plan doesn't appear to be the case.
Councillor Peter Young, your question, then Councillor Vorster.
Thanks, Chairman. I note that there was a development approval made in May 2016, which was for a material change of use, shops, cafe, restaurant, and so on and so forth. Did that attract public submissions? Do we know?
Through the chair to the councillor, it did go through public notification, but we don't have the details on us.
So the answer to the question is yes, it did. In the 2009 planning scheme, was there one in 2009?
2003.
2003. There was a blue dot on the map in Gilston that talked about shops being, and it was over, I don't know if you're familiar with the area, over near what is now the Gilston Hall and the new playground there. And there was feedback saying there was feedback from the community saying they would like a small shops in Gilston, and so it was provisioned in the city plan. We had lots of submissions about this being unacceptable at the time, but interpreting how that public notification period went compared to this one, I think it'd be fair to say that the community is much more comfortable with the body corporate private development outcome than what they are currently. But also there was an agreement, as I understand, struck between the owner of this property and the owner of another property elsewhere that wanted to deliver the shops that necessitated the reconfiguration of this into entirely residential, so that other location closer to the previous blue dot could deliver the shop solution, which is not dissimilar to that in the other location. There was lots of objections, but there was also submissions for a shop and lots of support.
And that was approved under delegated authority, I note. So there's been mention of this proposal not triggering the requirement for open space within the development itself because it hasn't achieved 100 lots. Does that come from our land development guidelines, or where is that trigger for 100 lots?
Through the chair, it's in the reconfiguring a lot code, I believe. Memory, it's in one of our development. I think it's a reconfiguring a lot code.
So it's hard and fast. Like if I put in a DA for 99 lots, I don't have to provide a park.
Correct.
And that's what they did. I had 81 lots plus 18 duologs.
Right. I don't like this development much at all, Chairman. I would have thought it'd be much more agreeable outcome and much more beneficial for the future community if we were able to achieve some green space, at least in the proximity of those proposed stormwater basins, which to me are just a functional thing that will often appear overgrown and unaccessible because they perform a stormwater function, and it wouldn't have taken a lot to remove 2 lots. Are we in the position to do that as conditions? I mean, it's not what they've applied for, but...
Councillor Young, obviously we're in a position to do whatever we want with conditions as this committee, but like the reconfiguration of the lot code is very clear that if you're under 100 lots, you don't have to provide active open green space. So I think our chances of defending that position would be incredibly low. I appreciate the intent, but I don't think that's a path we necessarily want to go down with this.
But is it possible that that's why stage 4 hasn't been included in this application?
Yeah.
So
I mean...
Yeah, but not
not
a balanced lot.
So, Councillor Gates, that drawing that Roger did up actually indicates what a lot layout could look like if they came in the future and changed that, and they'd still be under the 100. Because I did test that theory with officers.
Okay, thank you.
That
wasn't your drawing,
non-stageable lot is quite a large mansion with a fancy cellar. I've been inside that house. It's quite a piece of work.
And it'll be redeveloped in the next 5 to 10 years if I was the future.
Other questions, councillors? Councillor Vorster, we're up to you.
Sorry, Chair, and sorry to interrupt, but can someone just tell me, once the duplexes get added, and is that on this?
Hypothetical, councillor Gates, because we don't know how many applications will come in for duplexes.
We can do it.
I just want to know how many lots there could possibly be if all of the blocks highlighted for duplex get developed and stage 4.
Through you, Mr Chair, difficult question. The ROL code defines that when you have over 100 lots, it requires a park. A dual occupancy on one lot is 2 dwellings, but it's still only one lot. So, look, we've done a sort of a rough sketch. In our opinion, the maximum amount of lots that you're likely to achieve in this subdivision is about 94, 95, under the 100 lots. Look, we don't have an ability to recommend a park because they're complying with the ROL code.
Okay.
But what's the maximum number of dwellings likely?
Through you, Mr Chair, I don't know. Anyone's entitled to make an application. This is what the applicant sort of envisaged for dual occupancy lots. I suppose down the track, if somebody wants to put an application in, we'll assess it on its merits at that time.
And that would be the stage where the requirements for it to be a gentle scattering of them on corner lots would be used, not every single corner lot in a new subdivision. Yeah.
So it's 81 lots with obviously a number of them potentially dual occupancy, in which case there'll be 99 dwellings.
Yeah, but so, and forgive me, but my understanding of the particular code only references lots, it doesn't reference dwellings.
Understood, yeah. But still doesn't mitigate our ability to impose a condition to take a couple of lots out and...
As I said before, if you got words, councillor Young, that would be, you can do that, but I think defending it would be very, very difficult. Councillor Vorster, your question. I've gone to Councillor Vorster a couple of times now, so Councillor Vorster, your question.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Just a couple of questions. This used to be in Division 8, now in Division 11, but we had the breakwater, the early first stage of breakwater, right? And there was some issue, I think, in the court or whatever, and stage 2, 3 and 4 never ended up being built. And we ended up with this real amenity issue at the end of a half-completed street in stage 1. And I suppose my question is, do city officers have any level of comfort from the applicant that stage 2 will proceed immediately after stage 1 is constructed and so on and so forth? And if not, are there some conditions we can have, some potential conditions that we can contemplate to try and just protect amenity for the residents who might be at the innermost part of stage 1 affected by an abandoned stage 2 or an undeveloped stage 2 for 1, 2, 5, 10 years?
Through you, Mr Chair, that's an extremely difficult question for us to respond to. It's highly likely they'll do bulk earthworks all at the same time. They'll likely earthwork the whole site. So when you talk about amenity protection, I think it is a guarantee that the amenity impacts of bulk earthworks will actually be done all at once. Are there any other specific amenity issues you're looking at?
So if we can just go to the staging diagram again, if you wouldn't mind. So say stage 1 gets built, and because, I don't know, the economy is in the toilet or capital becomes difficult to access, maybe stage 2 and 3 are deferred. Bulk earthworks have been carried out. Hopefully we haven't disturbed any imported red fire ant nests. In my experience, what would happen to an area like stage 3 and 2 is that would be almost left to nature to reclaim until some future date, right? And in the meantime, having disturbed all that soil and the remnant vegetation and this, that and the other. Weeds then overtake this area and then begin impacting things like vegetated open drains, nearby parks, and also spreading a seed load into the lawns and gardens of the nearby residents. Sometimes residents can develop concerns around fire risk because the property's not being maintained for immediate development. It's just disturbed and then left to ruin. If there was a sense that the developer proposed to do this all in one leak, I'd be comfortable not speaking up. But given my experience in breakwater, I just wonder what the reasonableness might be for a condition that required these undeveloped lots in stages 2 and 3 to be maintained to some standard so that we don't have, issues to do with fuel load for fire and weed load from a biosecurity point of view.
Can I ask a connected question to that? Is it reasonable for us to ask them to adjust the stages? I don't know if that's reasonable. Like the idea that stage 2 becomes stage 1 because it's abutting an existing, you can't change that up. No, I wasn't sure if that was reasonable or not, but I actually really like that line of questioning because if I got stage 1 to be, so stage 2 became stage 1 and stage 3 became stage 2 and stage 1 became stage 3, then you're actually building back as opposed to all the new houses having the trucks continually go past them on,
Through you, Mr Chair, this is what the applicants applied for. We believe it complies with the city plan and the land development guidelines, and we're recommending approval based on that staging plan. Officers don't have, in our opinion, the ability to change the staging layout. That's an applicant's prerogative.
Can we just return to my question though for a moment? And I appreciate Councillor Tozer as the local councillor trying to reorder the staging to better suit his community, but would it be reasonable for us to attach a new condition to ensure that the undeveloped stage 2 and 3, while undeveloped, is maintained to some standards, that we don't have weed, cover, proliferation, fuel load, all of these complaints that can sit alongside established homes for, in my experience, decades?
Yeah. Through you, Mr Chair, there's no city plan standard that comes to mind, but if the committee was minded to, it could put on a condition similar to what you've just said, Councillor Vorster, that if any of the stages remain undeveloped, that the landowner keep them in a neat and tidy state. But I don't have a town planning standard to refer you to.
Look, in deference to the chair, I don't propose to screw around with wording today, but perhaps if there are words being developed to support Councillor Tozer at full council, I think that would be an important bit of amenity protection, not only for the existing residents, but the future residents there, and hopefully hurry along the development, right? And again, this is not me trying to make life difficult. At the breakwater development, those parcels sat undeveloped for probably 2 decades, and the amount of complaints that I received about vermin and fire and pest trees and all the rest, it actually created a burden on us as an organisation to respond to those complaints. If it can be proactive, I think that's a better outcome for the community and the administration.
Mick, that sentence you just said sounds like a reasonable thing to add. So if we want to put that in writing, if we're going to be adjusting the recommendation to add in the lighting section, we may as well add that part in today. Other questions, councillors? So I had one quickly, just in regards to stage 3, and I think that's referred to as road 2. So it comes to a blank end, anticipating that it connects into a development next door in the future. That development's already there.
Already approved.
So that it
Under construction.
bulk earthworks are under construction. So we're not.
There it is there. Okay.
Yeah. So we're not going to have so that's next door, so that'll be built in place. So we won't have a situation where I've got waste vehicles trying to reverse down streets in the blank ends.
Through the chair to the chair, sorry. As you can see, it is under construction, but I believe we do have a condition for temporary cul-de-sac head if it were the case that it wasn't constructed.
Very good. And can I check too, so on this particular plan, and forgive me, I think that's fairy wren or fantail, there's a little green section there showing as open green space just on the left. Is there a footpath connection into that park, Councillor Tozer?
go in the little green space to the immediate west of the site.
Yep, right
There's
next door to it.
Effectively, what will happen is this development and that existing council reserve will become one reserve. And my understanding is that won't be fenced, and they'll become effectively one council drainage asset between the two. There is a path that goes through there.
So there is a path that goes
There's a
through.
pedestrian connection to the west.
And the new development continues that connection to make sure that's connected?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
That's how I've read the report.
Okay.
Through the Chair, that's correct. There's a condition, and I'm just trying to find which one it is. It might in fact be condition 20.
No, that's all right. I'll take your
There
word
is a
that-
condition that's.
I'll take your word the
specifically
condition's
references
there.
that. I'll just find the right number.
Okay, so that was my couple of questions. Councillor Peter Young, question?
Yeah, one more. Thanks, Chairman. Is there a plan showing the proposed footpaths in the development, please? The plan I thought was the footpaths is actually showing mountable curbs, that one.
Through the Chair, I don't have one in the presentation, but they have given us the plan with the footpaths which we have conditioned, which they are shown on this plan, but just not very clearly.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last bit.
So that,
Thanks.
through the Chair, the plan that's just been provided there is like a statement of landscape intent plan. So I think they call it the master landscape plan. And it shows the, essentially every street has a footpath on it, including along Woolley Drive, which terminates then at around Lot 1. And that's another reason why officers believe it was reasonable to have that connection, that crossing across to the park, because all those footpath connections will give us that future residents that access to that open space.
Just for the committee's information, Chairman, the footpath plan that I've got pretty much mimics the location of the mountable curbs there, so it's...
Councillors, if that's the end of the questions, of course it's not. Councillor Owen-Jones?
Well, it's not, because I'm still concerned about lot 74. So I can accept the fact that the Woolley Drive lots can all be constructed under stage 4, but the house lot and 74, so if we approve 74 at council, it prevents the road layout that Roger showed me from being constructed. So,
through you, Mr Chair, I'd just like to clarify that that was just very indicative about potential options to get future lots within lot 81. It
yes,
wasn't
you
defined.
can't do it if you allow for 74.
Correct.
So whereas if you were to remove 74, it would actually make a more logical T intersection available in the future for the balanced lot.
Through the Chair, we're sort of boxing at shadows somewhat. They may have genuine intentions to keep the existing house and not develop it further. So
and they may, but like in 10 years or 15 years' time, when it ultimately gets redeveloped because it's the last 7,000 square metre block or whatever it is in the street, and it's hemmed in on the western side by an existing small lot development, it'll get developed and we'll end up with a poor configuration of road.
Through the Chair, potentially, but we've assessed this application based on the plans that they've submitted to us.
Yeah, so if we approve 74 and it stays like that for 5 years' time and somebody else comes along in the future, the only way you will be able to get a formalised road will be at the northern end of 74, which will end up with a zigzag street. And we've got an opportunity of not approving 74 now, and there you go.
Through the Chair, officers consider this application complies with the city plan and the land development guidelines.
Sorry, thanks.
Takes it as asked and answered now. Councillor Gates, your question?
Well, I was confused about, with stage 4 being a balanced lot, does that mean that we are considering that lot layout as part of today's application?
81 is the balanced lot.
Only 81. Okay, so then I agree with Councillor Owen-Jones that we shouldn't be approving lot 74, whether it complies with the guidelines or not. I would hope that we could remove it.
Can I make a proposal to move us forward? That block is above the 400 square metres. Can we propose in the conditions an amended drawings plan or amended plan where they have to cut that section off and line it up with the one next door? that still keeps it in the relevant size, that is cut the top off it. Would that make everyone happy?
Access to the site. So if we level it off, if I've understood correctly, where is the VXO?
They can, Roger, you seek the intent I'm seeing for. So we're going to take a 10-minute break because there's a couple conditions to change. We'll look at that one too, and then we'll come back to our new recommendation to go into debate on. Meeting adjourned for 10 minutes. So we'll recommence the meeting. We've taken that time during the break to make some adjustments to a couple conditions. Roger, would you mind just quickly highlighting what conditions, or would officers mind quickly highlighting what conditions we've touched and what changes we've made?
Through the chair, thanks for embarrassing me. I was halfway through a slice.
My pleasure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've added a condition in the amended plans conditions requiring the removal of lot 74. There you go. So it's a new Roman numeral 4. Sorry, no, that's not the one. It's condition 2 or something. Keep on going. Yeah, keep on going. Keep on going. There we go. So as you can see, sorry, Roman numeral 10, delete proposed lot 74. What we've also done is change the recommendation now, so we'll be recommending approval to you for 80 lots, not 81. And if you keep on going, scroll down. So stop. Condition 8, we've added a B, and that is now undeveloped lots in stages 2, 3 and 4 are to be adequately maintained to prevent community nuisance to council's satisfaction until a time that they are developed. So we think this is a catch-all. Undeveloped could be dust, could be weeds. So we think prevent community nuisance is a catch-all to our satisfaction until they are developed. And the last change, keep on scrolling down. That's to do with lighting, so the Wombat Crossing. Okay, so this is condition 21. We've added Roman numeral 4, and there's an additional condition, must have adequate street lighting adjacent to the Wombat Crossing area. So we have one last outstanding issue for officers to resolve, and that is the interface with existing lots and their fences, and how we can attempt to address the space between the proposed fence and the existing fences. And officers will liaise with the applicant and the divisional councillor, and we'll have something ready by council.
Very good. So councillors, we have a change to the officer recommendation. Seeking a mover for that change recommendation, Councillor Vorster. A seconder, Councillor Owen-Jones. Councillor Vorster, you to open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll be only very brief because ultimately this is a important local issue that Councillor Tozer's obviously led a very transparent open community discussion on, and I just think it's good that we've been able to support Councillor Tozer today in securing some early wins on behalf of the community by addressing issues that might be linked to the way in which development unfolds at the site, but most importantly ensuring that future residents within this precinct get to enjoy a very high standard of amenity. Because all too often, sometimes the shortest path to an outcome is not the best one, and all members really today have contributed to, I think, an overall better outcome. And we've done so bound by land development guidelines and restrictions that the state place on us. So I think what we're proposing today is fair, it's reasonable, and it reflects our best attempt at this committee stage to get a good outcome for our community, and that's only been informed by the representations by Councillor Tozer today.
Other speakers for and against? Councillor Tozer, were you wishing to contribute?
I'd love to. Thank you, Councillor Hamill. Look, there's no doubt in my mind that the members of the Gilston community who currently live there have mixed feelings about development of this nature. The lot sizes in this development are, whilst compliant with the land development guidelines, and the hectare averages and such thing per hectare averages are significantly less than the existing development outcomes that are in Gilston right now. And I think probably quite rightfully the community has expressed some concern about that. So it's with mixed feelings that I get to this point, but generally I just want to say thanks to the officers. I've got to say Philip and is it Nathan? Yeah. I had in my head, yeah. Frodo. Yeah, I was just very confused about the. Have been really great to communicate with. They've been really open and communicative. And I also want to thank, now today or yesterday's Facebook conversation would probably constitute the fourth different community consultation I've had with the broader Gilston community on Facebook about this issue, and it was very gracious of you to answer those questions so openly. A lot of the questions I posed today were actually posed word for word from a Facebook thread that went up last night and a previous, so it was just really good to be able to engage in that transparent exercise and then have a public record today deal with them. One thing I would say is that there is no doubt in our city right now that there's some a lack of available housing. Supply is an issue, and the idea that today we're approving 80 lots in the centre of the city outside of Skyridge, which has got 3,500 dwellings going into it. There's not many sites in Division 9 and or the central part of the city that are able to provide that dwelling supply, particularly west of the highway. We've got some really great schools and great community assets that I know that people love living around. So I'll be pleased to support this ultimately, despite those mixed feelings at full council, but I do hope that the community can see the transparency that we've delivered today and have some reassurance about this being, frankly, one of the last lots in Gilston that can be developed. There's not really anything else in Gilston inside the conceptual land use map that can actually be done, or the emerging community zone, and I'm looking forward to meeting some new residents in due course.
Councillor Tozier, thank you for that. Councillor Vorster, are you wishing to close at all?
I think Councillor Tozier has done a great job at that.
Excellent. In that case, we'll take the vote. All those in favour? Okay, Councillor Peter Young, are you against this one or for this one? Yes. Okay, so that's right. So that is carried. Councillor Young, were you looking for your name to be noted on that one? Yes, please. Please note Councillor Peter Young voted against. Officers, thank you for your time. We appreciate your efforts as always, as we muck around with things on the floor. That now takes us to item 6.5. We welcome our friends from Strategic Planning. Councillor Owen Jones, I believe you had an interest in this one. Is there just questions?
So I had spoken to officers prior to the meeting just in regards to the existing precinct and the interest of, so the existing precinct's been developed over the last couple of decades. It's involved a significant investment in private capital into the marine industry, and I was particularly interested in making sure that those Gold Coasters who had invested an enormous amount of their own private capital into the marine industry were part of the consultation for this phase. And so I appreciate the officers have maybe spoken to some of the marine industry associations, but there's probably 4 or 5 landowners in that existing Coomera precinct that I think deserve to be part of this consultation, so that the city's at least aware of what their feedback, either positive or negative, may be in regards to the future expansion of the Gold Coast marine industry to the north.
So there's been a conversation with officers. Has that led to a change in the key stakeholder list, or are you looking to change a recommendation today to introduce something? What's the outcome?
We're just about to find out, Chair.
Sorry, through the chair, you still like a presentation today?
I wasn't going to seek the presentation. If there's an interest from other councillors, of course we can have it. Let's have the presentation then.
Thank you. Through the chair, good morning councillors. My name is Troy and I'll provide an update on the Northern Marine Precinct Master Planning Project. You can see the location up on screen, fronting Southern Moreton Bay, south of Cabbage Tree Point Village. If you want a reminder of the project area itself, it is on page 672 of the agenda. But first, just some background on the project approach. So in December of last year, Council endorsed the proposed project approach for the master planning project. Today's update is while Stage 2A technical investigations are ongoing, including project communications completed, opportunities to refine the technical investigation approach highlighted in green across Stage 2A and 2B, engagement with key stakeholders to date, and the bringing forward of tailored community and stakeholder engagement as outlined in green, including engaging with project area landowners and occupants, local residents such as within Cabbage Tree Point Village, recreational boating users and marine industry business community, including key businesses within the Coombe Marine Precinct. An updated project approach is included in attachment 1 on page 668 of the agenda. This year, introduced project information to the local community, including Cabbage Tree Point Village residents, and key stakeholder groups such as peak marine bodies and boating associations as representatives of all marine industry stakeholders citywide, including interests within the Coombe Marine Precinct. Importantly, this provided the opportunity for any interested stakeholders to sign up for future project updates, access project information to date, and be informed of any future engagement activities. The key engagement actions shown on this slide were completed between April and May of this year. The city's project webpage provided available project information, including FAQs and previous council reporting, alongside a dedicated phone line and email for any inquiries. With regard to technical investigations in progress, Stage 2A involves a further investigation of the topics shown on this slide. Through this process, it will assist the ongoing identification and confirmation of opportunities and challenges. Further, the process enables the consideration of supporting technical investigations to commence earlier and the benefits of bringing forward a tailored engagement activity. Before I provide an outline of the proposed tailored engagement approach as highlighted in red, this diagram represents the tailored stakeholder input, which includes of our internal stakeholders into the technical investigations as listed here. Engagement with external government and peak marine bodies and boating representatives, as outlined on page 662 of the agenda to date, will continue to support the analysis of opportunities and challenges through ongoing technical work. All technical engagement outcomes will inform the preparation of land use concepts to refine through the next stage of master planning project work. Tailored community and stakeholder engagement proposed provides an early opportunity to gather feedback to guide land use outcomes. As shown within the benefits of the engagement process on this slide, opportunities and challenges are a focus alongside enabling insights and ideas to be shared and to have buy-in into the master planning process. The approach will be specifically tailored for feedback from project area landowners and occupants, residents of the local area such as Cabbage Tree Point Village, recreational boat users and the marine industry business community citywide, including key businesses within the Coombe Marine Precinct. The engagement methods utilise GC Have Your Say for input on how the community and stakeholders relate to and experience the area. The survey will be supported by an interactive mapping tool to allow comment on a specific place or feature within or surrounding the project area. This will also gather further insights and ideas for the future of the precinct. The survey and mapping tools will be open to all interested stakeholders to help shape the draft land use vision and guiding principles, as well as the ongoing identification of opportunities and challenges. Additional tools include supporting communications and engagement collateral and talk to the planner sessions for project area landowners and businesses to meet with city officers directly. An engagement summary is included in attachment 2 on page 669 of the agenda. Linking to Stage 2A technical project work currently underway, including the Land Use Strategy and Place-Based Design Report, 4 precinct themes were used to develop the survey questions, as shown on this slide. The precinct themes were identified to help capture focused feedback and build on the opportunities and challenges, with map pins also themed and reflect survey questions. This slide outlines the 4 precinct themes linked to the technical investigations on the right to shape the survey and map pins for the community and stakeholder engagement approach, and together with draft opportunities and challenge mapping to assist with providing feedback. An example will be shown shortly with a map prepared for each theme based on key preliminary investigation findings. Feedback from the survey and map pins will inform the draft land use vision and guiding principles to be included in summary and recommendation reporting. The draft opportunities and challenges mapping to be finalised is included in attachment 3 from page 667 of the agenda. This is an example of the business and employment theme map with a relating information sheet to provide supporting images as shown on this slide. It represents the project investigation approach aiming to balance marine industry growth and recreational opportunities alongside other print-themed elements, maps such as unique qualities and characteristics of the local area as represented under the environment or place-related themes. In summary of next steps, feedback from the survey and supporting engagement tools will be key to refining the initial land use concepts. Further feedback from internal and external targeted stakeholders and opportunities and challenges will be considered. A report to PEC early next year will include the findings of the tailored community and stakeholder engagement, as well as the outcomes of Stage 2A technical work. This concludes today's presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Troy, Councillor Owen-Jones, question?
So it's just in regards to Troy pointed us to page 671, which is the project area. And I'm particularly interested in whether or not we should give consideration to the challenge that we have. So the project area is cadastrally based and is land based. The learned experience from Coomera is because the river itself isn't part of the scheme. There's been issues with dredging and the connectivity of the dredged area to the cadastral map. So I don't know whether or not we should give some consideration to extending the area to include to the centre line of the channel. So you had on your slide 10, you had an image that showed the hatched blue. It's actually not dissimilar to that type of presentation, but what happened at Coomera is the Gold Coast Waterways Authority, in conjunction with the city, cleaning the channel, and then there was a gap of maintenance between the seabed lease and the dredged channel, which didn't allow for vessels to move from the cleared channel to the cleared seabed lease. So I think that interface between the centre of the channel and the land-based activity is important and should form part of that. Does that make sense?
So it does, and I know, Troy, it's something we have spoken about a couple of times, but do you just want to talk to Councillor Owen-Jones on that's one of the key objectives of the talking with the different state agencies and Waterways Authority is not to repeat that mistake down there?
See, there's probably some state agencies that don't see it as being a mistake. So DES, for example, were quite militant in regards to the seabed and dredging outside of the seabed, which is, again, we're doing this because we want to create industry and we want to create jobs, but if you effectively can't utilise all of that water area, and because somebody gets excited, so I think that we should be very explicit in that regards. You can talk about smelly.
So we might get Troy, or as an officer, want to give Councillor Owen-Jones some indication of how we're tackling that particular problem, or at what stage of the this is a long process. What stage of the process is maybe the stage we'll tackle this problem in its fullest?
Through the chair, councillor, we're very early in the process, so I guess as part of our technical work is to explore all opportunities and challenges. So part of that is definitely, well, what is the current opportunity that the existing navigation channel, as shown on blue on screen, provides in terms of access to the area. So at current depths, it allows access for certain size of vessels. Is that the opportunity to continue into the future, or is there a need to consider a deeper channel depth for larger vessels? We don't have those answers at present, but it is something to be considered in terms of ultimately what size of vessels is required to be accommodated as part of future planning.
So I think a simple solution we could is extend our yellow hatched area out to the centre line, even though it's in the channel, and deal with our partners as they realise that's what we've done to them.
Happy to accept that, officers. Very good. Councillor Gates, your question?
Thanks, Chairman. Through you. As part of the technical investigations, I'm presuming, and Councillor Owen-Jones and I discussed this with officers during the week, the need to protect the residential community and especially the properties backing on from Royal Palm Drive onto that northernmost parcel of land, to protect them from any of the smelly industries like fiberglassing or the like. So will the next report have a layout that identifies what type of uses are proposed to which parts of that layout?
Through the chair, the outcome of this work is an initial land use concept, so it will show a general layout of what's intended in terms of future planning, noting that technical investigations will still be ongoing at that point before delivering a master plan. In terms of the interface to the local village that is there, if I just refer to the place characteristics and management theme that you can see on the left in terms of the interface that's been highlighted in green. So that is going to be a key consideration in terms of, well, that is definitely a challenge. What does that interface look like as part of the concept plans? But equally provides an opportunity in terms of, well, what does that mean with the position of different uses, acknowledging that marine industry uses generally can have an impact on sensitive uses. So it is definitely a key consideration to be considered through this early technical work.
I can't stress how important it is that there's no activities as part of this marine or proposed marine precinct that would affect those property owners.
I think Councillor Gates, obviously you represented that community for 12 years and I've now represented them for nearly a term, and I actually think it's the biggest opportunity in this entire piece of work by doing this so far in advance of when this land may be needed, is to make sure we get that right. But 1000% agree with your sentiment, and it is by far been the biggest concern raised by residents there, but I hope will lead to the biggest opportunity to make sure that we get the correct buffers and the correct interfaces and the correct land uses in the future. Councillor Owen-Jones, back to you.
So a good indication potentially of those correct buffers is the distance between Hope Island and the existing Coomera Marine Precinct. So in Hope Island, which is on the other side of the river to the existing precinct, we get very few complaints regarding noise and no complaints regarding smell. So, and it might be some 400 metres of buffer. So the hatched green there may benefit us to start with if we actually make it apparent that that is the buffer that we're expecting in that northern end. And I went to this year's AMEX conference, and one of the conversations that was being had was around the decommissioning of the fleet of fiberglass vessels that had been produced over the last 20 or so years, and the fact that it is a noxious industry that needs to be carefully managed. So I would be concerned if that type of activity, that messy part of decontaminating and pulling apart fiberglass vessels formed any type of activity that was close to the residential. Now, I'm not saying that it's not a bad outcome, but it needs to be well located within that large precinct.
And may lead to pick up on your point, Councillor Owen-Jones, that maybe after the technical investigations are done, if that buffer does have to be that wide, we may need to look at moving that yellow dashed line to the other side of the road to make sure we've actually got enough land to make this feasible. All that will flush out in the future.
So to me, it's the type of industry. So it may very well be that you can do a 12-metre high boat storage, which doesn't create any of those dramas, close to that existing hatched area, that transition area, and that makes sense, you know. But allowing people to grind fiberglass, you know, may not necessarily be what you want to do in that area.
Other questions for officers?
No, but I've got some proposed additional words.
I'll just check there's no other questions from anyone else. Very good. Councillor Owen-Jones, you've got a proposed change recommendation.
Yep, so a new 3. So the 3 would become 4, and there would be a new 3 that would say that officers of council personally meet with existing landowners within the Coomera Marine Precinct. To consult with them regarding the proposed Northern Marine Precinct. And I'm happy to talk to it if I get a second.
Second.
Could I just suggest a slight change?
Yep.
That officers seek to personally meet?
Yep,
Because,
that's fine.
me-
Officers off.
Council officers, if you like.
City officers of council. Yeah. No. Officers. Yeah, thank you. I could see it coming down the line. So I would say Nick, but I wouldn't want to name him in the...
Understood. Councillor Owen-Jones, you happy with your proposed 3?
Yeah, thank you. So it was a conversation that I had yesterday with our Chief Investment Officer just in regards to the importance of the marine industry to the Gold Coast. And Jeff had suggested that he might be able to be at today's meeting, but he was called to a meeting with the Mayor, so the Mayor beats Planning and Environment. And it was really just to make sure that we actually heard from those people that had invested money in the Coomera Marine Precinct and took on board their feedback. And they may be completely negative or completely positive, but my interactions with all of those owners is they're not the type of guys that are going to answer a have your say survey, and it would probably be in the best interest of the project for the North if we actually met them face to face and said, well, this is what we're thinking. We actually think that it complements the marine industry rather than being competitive. And ultimately, because of the difference of the depth and channel between Coomera and Steglitz, did I say it right? Yep. It probably is a different product. But I think it's important that we have those conversations and take on board any of the feedback that they may have in regards to if we're going to go through the process of creating more opportunity and more jobs in the north of the city, that we learn from some of the last couple of decades of work. So they may have some very clear views on how the state agencies, for example, may be able to better facilitate outcomes for employment. And I think it would be best if we took those up and brought them forward as part of the consultation report.
Well said, Councillor Owen-Jones. Councillor Gates, were you looking to contribute on this one?
No, I think Councillor Owen-Jones has covered it off very well. I'd just like to echo his sentiment that we've had huge investment, huge capital investment from the Coomera people, and it's very important that we protect what's already there. And my understanding is that this will be a very different type of precinct, and I think they need to be fully informed about what is proposed early in the piece.
Any other contributions, councillors? So I'm going to quickly say, echo both Councillor Gates and Councillor Owen-Jones's comments and agree with all of them. Yes, absolutely do. And just one final comment at this stage. I wanted to thank Troy for his work on this particular project to date and for his exceptionally high level of communication with me and with residents on this one. Obviously, those residents becoming aware of this investigation stirred up a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. Troy and the team have done an excellent job in responding as best they can to those concerns. So thank you for that, and thank you for the high level of communication with me. So that change recommendation was moved by Councillor Owen-Jones, seconded by Councillor Gates. Councillor Gates, second. Yep. Okay. All those in favour? Carried unanimous. Thank you, Troy. That takes us to item 6.6. I have a change recommendation for item 6.6. I'm going to ask that to be brought up on the screen straight away, please.
And I'd like to foreshadow.
Yeah.
What would you like? One, not for the flood one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, mine's the
That helps. Okay, so that probably makes more sense. So let's stick with 6.6, Councillor Gates, for a start. Okay. I'm like, this is
I
not.
was ahead of myself.
Okay, so 6.6, the city planning design for flood amendment package. That's a change recommendation which I will be moving. I have had a discussion with councillors about my reasons for proposing this change recommendation, but in a series of briefings with city officers on this item in the last couple of weeks, including briefings yesterday, I feel that, oh, sorry, seconded by Councillor Gates. Yeah. No. Continue on. So after a series of briefings with city officers, including some briefings yesterday, I feel there is a reasonable need to just defer this item for a couple more committee meetings to allow some further road testing to be done between our city assessment branch and our strategic branch on this item. The proposed recommendation still sees this item come back to us before the end of this year, so it can be set up for state interest check. It simply allows an opportunity for some further review work and road testing work to be done with our city assessment branch, who in the end are the branch that have to use the new policy and the new codes attached to it. So that's the reason for the change recommendations. Happy to take questions now. Councillor Vorster.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just wondering whether you'd be happy to insert one word so that it reads, undertake an internal review of the designing for flood amendment package.
So, Councillor, in conjunction with the Director and the CEO, that was the words provided to me from the Director and the CEO for this purpose. So I'm going to leave it as, I'll leave my recommendation as the Director and CEO gave me.
Well, I actually don't see the downside of saying internal, because that's, I actually don't want it to sprawl into disparate parts of the industry, deciding that a review also potentially includes them. We're trying to make sure that it works for the city and the administration. So I think the internal isn't necessarily a step too far.
So just looking at the heads nodding, I'm guessing that's something that other committee members have got an interest in. So we can insert that word. Other questions? Councillor Peter Young.
Chairman, I had a question about the mapping that's been provided, and by the time we get to the next presentation of this, I'd like this matter taken on board and perhaps addressed. There's no index to the maps, and so it's very confusing. So, for example, if you go to page 1061, the first map is showing Alberton, and the next map is Coombaba. So there's no geographical relationship, and then the next one from that is Mollendina. So they're not consecutively ordered, and normally at least you'd have an index map, so you know I'm looking for Coombe, there it is. So that'll be a great addition if it's possible.
Can officers reach out to Councillor Peter Young and discuss that further and how we might be able to improve finding that? Councillor Gates, question?
Chairman, I respect that you've received that wording from the CEO or whomever. However, does that make it clear that what we're interested in is to ensure that there is road testing of the codes by development assessment officers? I don't know that it actually clearly describes what I believe was the important factor in the briefing that we had, and that was that our development assessment officers had an opportunity not to review the whole package, but to really test on the ground the way that the codes work during the assessment phase.
Councillor Gates, it only takes these words came from Nick, and the CEO was aware of them, so I think they well and truly understand what the intent is.
Well, I would have a greater comfort if it said to ensure road testing of the codes by development assessment officers could be undertaken.
How about we let Nick have a go at this?
Sure.
Get a response, Nick?
Yeah. Through you, Mr Chair. So we completely understand the intent of what this review needs to be, but we can add in those words that Councillor Gates has just mentioned under undertake an internal review. Would you mind repeating those words,
Well,
Councillor
I
Gates?
simply said to ensure the road testing of the new codes by development assessment officers. I would have put that after the designing for flood amendment package. Sorry, rather than there, after the designing for flood amendment package.
You happy with that? Councillor Gates, are you happy with that?
Yes, Chairman, and I want to make the point that there have been industry bodies that the officers have worked very closely with on preparing this, and we're not aware of any negativity at all from any of those.
So, Councillor Gates, is there a question?
Oh, sorry, I thought you wanted me to speak to it.
No, just questions.
No, I don't have a question.
Is there any questions before I go to debate? In that case, since you're halfway down an opening, would you like to complete my opening?
To you, it's your motion. I'm sorry.
Only that there. So I did, in the preamble before introducing this, mention it, that this is a piece of work that has been ongoing since 2017. It is one of the most significant policy shifts pushed onto local governments by the state government in a long, long time, which this comes in the back of two major Brisbane flooding events and other flooding events in our region. So an incredibly important piece of policy work that will make an incredible difference to our city and all other cities in Queensland into the future. Because of its importance and because it is such a significant policy shift position, I think it is very important to make sure that the people who in the end have to use the policy and use the assessment tables, being our assessing officers, have had every opportunity possible to make sure that anything that could be refined to make their job easier in the future, to make sure they understand the intent better, to be ready for when this policy in the future hits the road, which it still has a little while to go. This is only to send it to state interest check when it comes back in the future. But for the sake of a couple of months to give our assessment branch a bit of extra time, I believe it's a worthwhile thing to do. Can I put on the record too, I appreciate probably the frustration of our strategic planning section for the delay, but I'm of the very firm opinion that it's the right thing to do at this time, and for the sake of a couple more months, that it'll improve outcomes. Councillor Gates, did you have anything to add to that?
Chairman, I just wanted to also highlight that we're cognisant of the need for the community to be aware of the risk that we know exists from the most recent modelling, that we trust that modelling, and that this will enable us to move forward and get this document on display fairly quickly without too much of a delay, with the confidence that there won't be future delays in assessment and that we've got all our ducks in line.
Councillor Peter Young, were you looking to contribute?
Yeah. Thanks, Chairman. I think the body of work that's been done is very impressive, and I'm grateful to the officers for their dedication to this matter for over a long period of time. I think there's been a lot of really good engagement. I certainly support the proposed motion to defer this, to have a bit more opportunity to prove that this will be an effective way, and it can be managed well through the development assessment process, which is critical. But I just want to recognise the great work that's been done. I think it's comprehensive, and it's a very difficult challenge, and technically I don't think there's any fault whatsoever in our modelling and the resulting outcomes from that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Vorster, contribution?
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I also want to thank city officers who have run an incredible process that has afforded everyone in this chamber, excluding Councillor Curtis, of course, who's a new arrival, to participate and provide feedback. It has been a very engaging process, and I've been certainly very comforted by it. I think the technical work is exceptional. It is must really set the standard, I think, nationally, and that's something that should be lauded. I'm sure in the fullness of time it will become award-winning, and perhaps the example we set here on the Gold Coast will be the standard that others will have to follow across the state. I did also want to acknowledge the work of the council, apart from the incredible work done from city officers, because some of the policy direction captured in this body of work has come about because of decisions we've made on specific planning matters. And I can think of one example to do with recreational space, and I can think of another one to do with a retirement village that was proposed to be constructed over water on a weir. And while I think the councillors who supported that development were keen to support city officers and were worried about unnecessary legal expenses, to my mind it just demonstrates that sometimes it's worth putting a DA through the rigour to settle a policy position. And whatever we might have invested into that process, we're reaping that as a dividend, as an asset in the policy that we're presented with today. So I hope and expect that there will be no material delay to the adoption of this policy. The chairman has given me every assurance that that won't be the case. And I really look forward to settling the way we deal with hazard to ensure that we can support development while also protecting vulnerable people moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Curtis, any contribution to the new 1,000-page policy?
I think it looks terrific, thanks.
In that case, I think we'll leave it at that and take the vote. So all in favour of the change recommendation? That's carried unanimous. We'll move now to 6.7, which Councillor Gates.
Chairman, I just had an addition that I'm hopeful that the committee will support.
So we might get
yeah,
Richard,
I need to just run it by Catherine first to see, and Richard to see that they're supportive.
Councillors, is there an interest? So I think most committee members have had a briefing on this one. Is there an interest in the presentation on this item?
No need.
I've got questions.
Okay, so we'll go straight to questions in that case. Councillor Gates, are you wanting to duck to Catherine and check your words first?
I had a question and I briefly raised it with Catherine. I noted that number 17 on our list of our submission, the summarised submission, had some words around it about the Stapleton Jacobswell Road and exit 38. And yesterday, with Councillor Owen-Jones, I had a meeting with our transport infrastructure people who recognise and who are dealing with the state government now about the significance of the Coomera Town Centre and all the road network around it. So I provided some words to the Minutes Secretary to suggest to officers if officers are in agreement, and Catherine did indicate that there would be support for this, for similar words to be inserted into the recommendation as appears on the screen in yellow now, which that a paragraph be included similar to point 17 to highlight the Helensvale to Coomera Regional Economic Cluster, picking up Foxwell Road and Helensvale Road, with the state government to deliver east-west interchanges and transport infrastructure at Foxwell Road, Beatty Road and Coomera North. So if you wouldn't mind, through the chair, providing your feedback.
Through the chair, as city officers, we're happy with that recommendation. From our perspective, it just reconfirms the need for infrastructure to support the ongoing growth of that area.
Thank you.
Doesn't seem like a lot of sense for the state government to introduce a new cluster but not talk about their infrastructure to it. So for the exact same reasons why the exit 38 Stapleton Jacobswell Road is in there, because the state government wants to see it as part of their future work. I can see the sense in that. So we'll let that sit there for everyone to digest and we'll go to questions in the meantime. Councillor Vorster, you have a hand up first.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. Just a few questions. My first question relates to the consultation process and whether city officers were provided with any information over and above what was publicly disclosed. And the reason why I ask that is when I visited the state government portal to have a look at the community consultation process for the regional plan, there was a document that related to the transport infrastructure mapping. I think that was the title of the document, because I know when we develop a city plan, for example, we're required to deliver a local government infrastructure plan to align an infrastructure pipeline with the population that we seek to deliver at specific locations. So when you jam people in, you need to offset those amenity impacts with trunk infrastructure. So when I look to the South East Queensland Regional Plan, the state government's proposed draft, I was very interested to see what they might have envisaged for transport infrastructure to help us meet these population targets. But the document that I saw published on the state government consultation portal was a transport infrastructure map that was current as of 2017, not 2023. And I just wondered whether city officers were provided with any updated mapping to suggest that we would see additional transport infrastructure over and above what was in that 2017 map.
Through the chair, Draft 17 of the submission.
Let me try that again. Through the chair, I can confirm that the transport mapping within the Shaping SEQ documentation has been updated since the 2017 version, and it does include components like the high-speed east-west connections now. So there are some additions to it. In addition to that, the South East Queensland Infrastructure Supplement does include a little bit of detail. It's not a lot, though.
Okay, so when, I suppose, that document, was that made publicly available? It really concerns me that the consultation opened and there was, for a moment at least, outdated mapping. Do we know whether at what date the new mapping was publicly released and how soon that was before the close of submissions?
Through the chair, I believe it was made available right at the beginning. What may cause confusion is some of the maps are really low resolution. The state government did provide the mapping in high resolution, but you needed to download them separately. They were all still on the website, so that's where we gained them from as well.
Okay, I would appreciate if you could send me those links so that I can correct my own thinking, because when I downloaded the individual documents, I didn't see, for example, I'm going to pull out a project here, heavy rail beyond Varsity Lakes. So does that project appear on the state government's updated maps?
Through the chair, that is identified as future planning. So it's not clearly identified or committed to in terms of heavy rail, but it does refer to high frequency public transport planning to be undertaken.
Okay, so there's no notional commitment, just that there will be planning. And I think that's kind of reflected, actually now just turning to page 11, where in the officer's report it says, importantly, the connection for the heavy rail to the Gold Coast Airport has not been committed to within the draft documents. Okay. What about light rail from Burleigh to the airport?
Through the chair, I can confirm that that has been reflected, and it's also identified as region shaping infrastructure.
So has it been reflected in a way that is different to the way in which heavy rail has been reflected, or is it only identified as future planning?
No, absolutely. It's very clear. It's got both the future stages, so the current to Burleigh and then from Burleigh through to the airport as, well, one is obviously underway at the moment and the other one is a future project, but it is certainly committed to infrastructure that's coming.
And the east-west links I'm intrigued about. So can you walk me through that? Because there has been this $2 million commitment from Council for the east-west, the Gold Coast Central east-west passenger transport study. Are the east-west connections in that plan reflective of the work that we're doing in that joint project?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
And that includes an east-west connection between Burleigh to Robina through Varsity Lakes, as we've envisaged?
Through Bond?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes it does.
Okay. My wife works at Bond, by the way.
Sorry.
Yeah, her maiden name is Bond. The other question I had concerning the regional plan is its relationship to the actual infrastructure plan, which if I go visit the state government website, there are a couple of regional infrastructure plans that are published, but the one for the southeast of Queensland basically says it will come at some point in 2023. Could you just walk me through the relationship between those two documents, and to the extent that there is an overlap, what does what risk do we have supporting a process that delivers a new South East Queensland regional plan without a full-bodied regional infrastructure plan?
Through the chair, very good question. So I guess it's worth noting that last regional plan review, we didn't actually have any infrastructure supplement or plan that was released at the same time. So the fact that we have an SEQ infrastructure supplement draft, SEQ infrastructure supplement, is actually a good thing. It's really good. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of detail in it. It is early in the development. The state have really identified the need to combine the two, infrastructure planning with growth planning, but it's a work in progress. The original aim was to develop a full infrastructure plan, but that has been reduced to this infrastructure supplement. The state have indicated that there is likely to be significant change from the infrastructure supplement that we have at the moment compared to the release of the final, and then the full infrastructure plan will be developed in 2025.
And it's so funny because from a local government perspective, we want to hold planning and infrastructure together. Yeah. And it concerns me that we're locking in this regional plan and just hoping that the infrastructure plan comes good. Would that, a release of a fundamentally different infrastructure plan, trigger some form of consultation either for that plan or because the regional plan might need to be amended in some way?
Through the chair, I believe that the regional plan is a statutory process and it has a requirement for the consultation. I don't believe the infrastructure supplement has that statutory requirement, so I don't know whether they will have any additional periods. They certainly don't have to.
So As you know, our city plan is nearing end of life, and at some point in the future, we'll commence a process to, redo it, I suppose. And it's my understanding that the next city plan will need to reflect the prevailing regional plan. Now, just read from the report. While the state government has engaged with city officers, the nature of the consultation has not been ideal. Primarily due to the very tight timeframes, the provision of information from the state government has been sporadic, with data often incomplete, inconsistent from previous advice, or provided without supporting evidence. While it is clear that the state government officers and associated subject matter experts are doing the best that they can within challenging conditions, the timeframes allowed for this review are inadequate to allow proper consideration of various complex policy positions. And I won't carry on. Thank you for the full, frank and fearless advice, can I say? Thank you. My question is, what risks might we have progressing a new city plan based on this regional plan, given this frank and fearless advice? Can we expect some shifting sands because this process has been so rushed?
Through the chair. So a new planning scheme would be relied upon to basically align with any of the new regional planning or state planning interests. Even the current planning scheme, they can make a directive for all planning schemes to be realigned to this. So they can do that through their process of approval. In terms of our program of work, we are actually more, I guess, in a better position than other South East Queensland councils because we are yet to commence our planning scheme review. There are other councils that have completed or are about to adopt their planning scheme, which will be required to then go back and realign it with a new regional plan. In terms of our sort of response, there's also a lot of unknowns. There's potential changes to the planning regulation and model codes and all that sort of stuff that is yet to be spoken of, yet to be provided to the city for review to actually determine the impact on our planning scheme.
Mr Chairman, just lastly, and I wish I was as studious as the Deputy Mayor in having prepared some words, but we're embarking on a great body of work concerning the Robina Central Planning Area. It's been a great process, and I'm very thankful to our strategic planners helping to lead that. For me, the regional plan is critically important because while that Central Robina area falls outside of our planning scheme, it's enveloped by the regional plan. And I was a little bit, and hopefully I've got this wrong, but I was a little bit concerned not to see, I suppose, some of our aspirations for the central part of Robina captured in the recommendations here and in the report. Fully acknowledge that we've got the east-west public transport connections and the acceleration of the Green Heart, and I'm thankful for that, but that's not the heavy lifting of the Robina study. And I've got particular concerns with the road network around Robina, which is Cactus, and you've all heard me talk about this for 8 years, that we're not taking this opportunity to tell the state government that there are some critical road projects that need to be progressed as much as east-west connections, not only for the benefit of the rest of the Gold Coast, but I have to say the region, because there are so many state services. So whether it's the TAFE, the stadium, the high school, the shopping centre, the station, I could go on. These are the hospital. These are state interests that sit within Robina. They deliver services that are important to the southeast corner, and I don't see that wholesomely, or fulsomely, I should say, reflected in this report. And my question is, at full council, might city officers entertain, in the same way we're entertaining at committee today, some stronger reference to the work that we're doing with the Robina Central Planning Area and the Robina Town Centre Gateway study to finally pin the government down on these essential infrastructure upgrades that we need to allow them to make the most of their land? Just through the chair. So the comments from Councillor Gates and the additional recommendation relate to the regional economic cluster. In the same sense for Robina to Varsity, that's another regional economic cluster. So we actually could address that through the enabling infrastructure to support that cluster looking forward. So it could potentially be quite a similar type of wording that could actually address that.
Can it not pretty well be exactly the same wording, just exchange Coomera for Robina?
And Robina Varsity.
Yeah.
I'm with the will of the room, but for me, again, there are so many state interests in Robina, yet the infrastructure burden keeps falling to us. So I'd just love to get it into this document so we can pin them down. And I'd appreciate that if we could, Mr.
Councillor
Chairman.
Voss, I'd be interested in dealing with that at committee. So if it was a reflection, if it was a mirror image of Councillor Gates's proposed change, it's like we're connecting economic clusters to state infrastructure in the north, the Helensvale Coomera cluster.
You're right, Chair. It's exactly the same. Like the state hospitals being built at Coomera, the TAFE is at Coomera. It's exactly the same issue for Robina Varsity as I'm experiencing in the north of the city.
Councillor Voss, only knowing that smithing words is easy for you, but could we, in using what Councillor Gates has done, while we take some more questions, could you come up with something so we can add an 8
Yep,
to
sure.
include
Let
your
me just
cluster?
take a quick screenshot to get the words and I'll draft something up. Thank you.
Right. So, Councillor Patterson, over to you for questions.
Thank you, through you, Chair. With this time frame, so I understand at the moment you haven't been provided quite a bit of material that you would actually require to respond properly. So my understanding is you haven't been provided population projections. They haven't been finalised by the state government yet, nor have the employment benchmarks been provided for the 2046 planning horizon. The proposed regulatory changes haven't been provided, and targets for social housing. So my question is, have they given you any indication of when they're going to give this to you, given we don't have another planning committee meeting before you've got to submit this back? So effectively, you need to get all this information from them to reconsider your work before a council meeting, because otherwise you're effectively doing it blind. Have they given you any indication if they're going to give you the information you need to do this?
Through the chair, in terms of the regulatory provisions, there has been an indication of timing for late September, early October.
So after they are requiring a document back, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So I find this quite bewildering. How you're expected to do your job when they haven't done their job yet. Particularly on...
Councillor Patterson, I think Richard had a contribution there that I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I guess the key issue on that front is the expectation that the local governments will consider providing a housing supply statement as part of our submission to the state, and that would be prepared during the consultation, excuse me, during the consultation period. The issue for us is we have been provided some data, but it's incomplete and it's not actually reflective of the current overall 2046 projection for shaping SEQ. And it's also come with a confidentiality clause. So the challenge for us is in bringing forward to council anything with relying on that data even, that it would have to be confidential, but we don't have that option when we bring planning reports, planning policy to council. The other issue we face is the housing supply statement is intended to provide 2, 5 and 10 year responses from the city in terms of the housing crisis around the region, but we haven't actually been provided the benchmarks that we would work towards for 5 and 10 year periods. So what we've been concerned about and discussing with the state is we really need that information. We've proposed through this report that we would use the time between now and the next council meeting, which is in October, late October, to do what we can to work on a housing supply statement. But we're also continuing to engage with the state about the information that we would need to be able to provide a meaningful statement as well.
Thank you. A follow-up to that. I do find, another thing with the timing of it that I find somewhat odd is I would think that a resident in our city who would want to make a submission would be interested in knowing what the City of Gold Coast submission would be first. But effectively, our residents are asked to make a submission without knowing what ours is first. Does that make sense to you?
Through the chair, quite often with state planning policy or state projects, we're invited to make a submission at the same time as the public, so that's pretty normal process with the state government.
Okay.
Sorry, through the chair, just on top of that, but this is unprecedented. The previous regional plans haven't released or undertaken a process like that. They've provided all the information up front so that councils and the community and the industry can make an informed decision.
Yeah. Okay. Two other questions. So the first one is, we've got on page 21 in the table the details on housing dwellings per population, which was provided to the Mayor from Minister Leanne Enoch, 26th of April 22, and from memory that took at least 12 months to get that data after we asked. We finally got it, and it shows us that the City of Gold Coast has less than half the social housing dwellings per capita than Brisbane does. My understanding is there has still not been any targets presented on what the state government would like to see. Are they really happy with this kind of level, or have they provided to you any detail on what the target is for social housing in the city?
Through the chair, the regional plan outlines a proposal of 20% for social and affordable housing. At the moment, it doesn't break that down into how much would be social and how much would be affordable. So amongst other things, one of our recommendations is that they focus on the social housing component at the moment, and that for the city it needs to be at least 9%.
Yes.
And that's to address the lag as well as what we'd need for future growth, which is, I think, off the top of my head, about 14,000 dwellings, social housing dwellings.
But through you, Chair, so given that the state is really responsible for social housing, they haven't given us their targets in terms of what they want to see, whether they think that our city should be on par with Brisbane, or have they given you anything like that?
Through the chair, not yet. We believe that's under development at the moment, and hopefully we'll see it soon.
So again, they're asking you to provide submissions without giving you that information. Okay, and then the last one is regarding, you've made the point here that we would want the state government to commit to a comprehensive and urgent review of infrastructure charges. I remember many conversations in here and many requests to the state government for that to happen. So my understanding is that their response to our last one, well, actually, maybe I suppose I'll ask you the question. We've asked them to do that before. What was the response? Where are we at now with that? Well,
yeah, or through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Gates and I were at a regional planning committee meeting where that question was raised by Councillor Gates, and the Deputy Premier at the time said there won't be a review of infrastructure charges between now and the next election.
Great.
Okay, that's my questions. Thanks.
Councillor Gates and then Councillor Peter Young.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm just interested in, on page 47, in the additional points of submission, it mentions under consolidation and expansion dwelling growth ratio an aspirational move to 70-30 consolidation expansion. I thought we were taking out, or that the state had suggested removing any specific percentage targets with a preference for us to focus on diversity in housing supply. So I want to know why that's there.
Through the chair, yes, you summarised it perfectly. In terms of the different local government areas, they have taken out the reference to consolidation expansion for the regions, the sub-regions, but at the overall SEQ region, they've kept the target of 70 to 30, was 60-40, and now it's moving towards 70-30. So
Wasn't it 80-20?
Sorry?
It was 80-20, wasn't it?
Not for us. So, sorry, they're not keeping ours. Ours was 80-20. This is for the full SEQ region.
Oh, okay.
Yes, they've kept it at that high level, but not at the sub-regional level.
I see.
So that's the 70-30.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The other thing that I was really interested in as part of our submission was in item 28, where we focus on the Southport PDA. I don't know if I've been asleep at some stage, but I've never seen the new vertical state college being supported by council for inclusion. Did I miss that? Has that formed part of our former discussions to have those particular points included?
What page is that, sorry?
That's on page 46.
Through the chair, I'd have to follow that one up for you. Unfortunately, I'm not across that detail.
No, 46, page 46. It's point number 28 for other councillors in the room. I just can't recall it. So, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Richard, Catherine, that's probably going to be difficult to answer now, but can we get an answer to that one before full council? Unless we have an answer now, but it doesn't look like we do. No, so we'll save that one for advice to come to all councillors before full council. Councillor Gates, was that the end of your questions? Councillor Peter-Young.
Thanks, Chairman. I just wanted to get my head around this gentle density concoction. In our city plan now, we've got low density, and I'm thinking about areas like Pacific Pines. The whole suburb is covered by that, as a low to medium, I think, in fact. And we have a 9 metre limit. What does gentle density mean for that sort of area?
Through the chair, gentle density, while it is a new term that's been introduced, it really is very similar to the missing middle terminology, if you recall that. So our city plan does already incorporate a lot of those provisions. But one of the areas that the state have indicated they will be targeting is those low density or low medium density residential areas. And they are looking at changing things like building height. So at the moment, as you mentioned, we've got 9 metres or 2 stories, and they might look to change that to 3 stories.
Just like that.
And what about minimum lot size? I think they're looking to change.
So just adding to that through the chair, this is what we were talking about in terms of the regulatory provisions that we haven't actually received yet to review. But that's also the state have signalled that in the draft Shaping SEQ Regional Plan that they are looking at potentially the low density zone and the low medium zone for those regulatory changes to apply. And that's where the state have said, but if a local government prepares a housing supply statement, that they would not necessarily apply those to that local government. So this is why we're looking at the housing supply statement and looking to put our best foot forward as best we can to actually respond to that request, albeit it's very difficult for us to respond to that request in the consultation period because I think it, from memory, closes on the 9th of October. Yep. We haven't got the data right now in terms of the benchmarks that we need to work towards, and the next council meeting, that's like we've rushed really hard to get just this few weeks of work done to get it onto this agenda, and it was a supplementary agenda because we needed every minute we could to prepare this. But we really, you know, we're putting our best foot forward. We're saying, look, we're working with the state to try and do this, but it won't be possible to do it within the 9th of October period because the next council meeting is the 25th of October, and we are keen to get that information from the state to help us actually prepare it.
Chairman, if I might have another question. It relates to the environment, which has no voice apart from what we can put forward.
Yeah, our voice, we all love trees here, Mr Chairman.
And I just want to clarify the mapping that supports this Shaping SEQ review does not include our biodiversity corridors, even though we've identified them as critical and we've provided the mapping data to the state and we've adopted those and endorsed them repeatedly over many iterations of the city plan, the state government's SEQ review doesn't include those corridors. Is that right?
Through the chair, that's correct, in terms of an image. So they do reference each of the corridors in terms of text, which is good, but what we were seeking was to reflect that in the mapping. And that still isn't done, even though it is done in some other areas. So we'd like to continue to liaise with the state to get that.
So presumably the mapping includes some kind of elements of environmental assets and areas we want to protect. So why would they have excluded the corridors, do you think?
Yeah, through the chair, I'm not sure. I suspect with some of them it's the urban footprint, but even now our corridor that passes through the interurban break isn't shown. But that is something that we'd like to continue to speak to them, and it's one of our points of submission. So we are hoping to see that reflected in the final.
Thank you.
Councillor Gates.
Can I just give you a comfort that this has been discussed also at the SEQ planning meetings, and the criticality of the two interurban breaks in the region have been highlighted as being of extreme importance.
Great, thank you.
Councillors, other questions? Shoot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to pick up something that Richard mentioned around confidentiality. So could I just get clarity on what information is confidentially held by the state government and whether or not those I suppose I know the answer, but what would the nature be of the confidential information that has not been captured in this report, a report that we're relying on in order to make a decision today?
So it's the, excuse me, it's the detailed breakdown and projections that underpin the 2046 targets. So it's actually what we'd use to look at each 5-year cohort out to 2046 for growth. And the new, so you've probably seen in the actual regional plan, there's, they've got new categories. So rather than use the 80-20 split for consolidation and expansion, they're now talking about dwelling types and the supply of housing specifically by dwelling type to meet our population projections. It's that information that we've been seeking because it helps us to then prepare a housing supply statement that responds to the type of dwellings that we've been allocated.
So just to clarify through you, Mr. Chairman, it's not that this information does not exist, it's that it does exist but has not been disclosed.
The information we need, we understand is with the state, but we haven't been provided it. We have been provided information a while ago, but it's not the scenario that is the shaping SEQ projection, which is what we need.
Okay, and I'm not trying to put you in a difficult position, so feel free to just reject through you, Mr. Chairman, reject answering to this question at all. But what I'm trying to understand is for what reason, I'm just trying to understand the motivation here. For what reason would the government want to not release this information? If I had to hazard a guess, it would be that perhaps it's uncertain because the process has been so rushed and they don't want to be tied down to particular figures and targets which might not be met. But are there other reasons which might create risk for us, and how would we describe that risk?
Through the chair, I don't know the reasoning of the state as to why we haven't been provided that information. We've raised it with them on several occasions and they've not yet given us a clear response. So,
okay. And in the absence of that information, just help me understand the risk. Because again, I go back to this problem of having to align a city plan with a regional plan. And for me, this is like the foundation stone. You screw up the foundation, you end up with a house of cards above. So what is the risk to us as we progress our work on city plan amendments in the absence of this information?
Through the chair, I guess for us, like things like a whole of city plan review would come after the final data is actually decided on and provided through the final shaping SEQ update. So it's on consultation at the moment. So we'll know where they've landed with the projections. The issue for us is the overall projection, the 2046 number, is not too dissimilar to what we already have in our general growth. What we don't have is the detail around the 5 and 10 years ahead, which they want the housing supply statement about, and for which these regulated provisions are sitting there that we don't know anything about. So it's really our ability to provide a well-considered housing supply statement that addresses the shorter term response to housing for the region and for the Gold Coast in particular, and understanding within that what types of dwellings and how much they require. We don't have that information.
Right, so we've got a housing crisis, a need to deliver housing in the short and medium term. The state has put that onus on us. We stand ready to respond, but in truth, we don't know how to respond in a way that's consistent with their aspirations and projections, because in terms of dwelling type, to secure that housing diversity, they've not shared that information with us.
That's right. I don't know, Sam, if you wanted to show the actual what they have provided in shaping SEQ, which is in the presentation, but it's effectively a graph with no data on it. So it's just some arrows up, and we just don't have the detail that.
So, Mr. Chair, ultimately we end up with targets that are imposed upon us that we don't have any opportunity. They'll just be imposed upon us and released as part of the final plan that we ultimately won't have the chance to provide any feedback on.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude my question by, I guess, summing up in this way. We've been asked by the state government to consider gentle density. I think we've discovered a density of another sort.
Good finish, councillor. I'm going to pull that up. Did you have another question? Okay, so I'm going to pull us up there are questions for now because we have a few GBIs to get to and I want to give us a break before our next committee. So if we can go back to the recommendation, please. Now, councillor Gates, I'd already accepted you as the mover of this with your change. Are you happy to accept councillor Vorse's addition?
Most definitely. We're very much aligned on this.
Very good. So in that case, before I open a short debate period, can I have a seconder for this item? I got councillor Pauline Young. Councillor Gates to open.
Thanks, Chairman. I want to say thanks to the officers for putting together a submission for us in extremely difficult circumstances given the time frame. It's been made very clear that the state wants to get this through by the end of the year, and it's the shortest ever time frame for consultation that I think any of us can recall. Having said that, we've got some good points that have been raised both by the officers and today, I think, in order to make our submission. And all we can really do is encourage the community to participate in the opportunity as it has arisen, even though there's a short time frame. And I know that there was very limited opportunity in our respective areas for people to actually attend the pop-up. So it is a big ask from the community to ask them to travel to the very few places where they can have face-to-face contact with officers to get explanations on this. But we're stuck with it being what it is at this point in time. And again, just well done to the officers for getting as much information as they have to date to us.
So I got councillor Peter Young first and then councillor Patterson for contributions.
Thanks, I'm particularly concerned with some elements of this, and I'm grateful to the officers, as is councillor Gates, and I'm sure all of us, for the excellent quality of material we've been presented in a short space of time. But I just would like to pick up on one of the statements made in the report on page 5, and I think we should lift this and put it as our new number, or a number 1 in this resolution and recommendation to council. And the wording would be that council notes that the timeframes allowed for this review are inadequate to allow proper consideration of various complex policy positions that, if implemented, will have long-term implications for the city and the region. And I believe that we should include that as the new number one, so it's right out there in the public eye, and it's in the state government's eye that we are really feeling constrained about this, and all of our subsequent decisions reflect that.
Would have been handy before we went into debate, possibly. Since we're into debate. So if there's an interest in doing that for council, Councillor Young, we can do that, but I've already gone into debate on this and I'm not going to look to go back and make adjustments to it now. Unless
I could move an amendment now and just deal with it, Mr Chairman.
How about we try this a different way?
Accept that?
Councillor Gates, based on what you just heard from Councillor Peter Young, what would your thoughts be on adding that to your motion? So we don't have to deal with it at full council, let's do that then. So could you help the minute secretaries find the exact words you're referring to, Councillor Young?
So on page 5 of the report, about halfway down, there's a large paragraph beginning while the state government, and then there's a, I'll take this up to the officers.
It's not easy, is it?
Okay. They're changing my...
How many GPIs do we have?
3, which we're going to do in exactly 3 minutes.
So if you'll accept that as an amendment, Chairman?
I will. So we need to move that we're going to do this as an amendment to Councillor Gates's recommendation.
Motion, yep.
Now, while Councillor Gates was happy to accept that as an amendment, I think it's only fair with the amount of changes that I'd recall for a mover and seconder, if committee members are happy with that. We're happy with that. So, Councillor Gates, are you happy for your motion just to...
I don't think it can. It was a live motion. It has to appear on there as the original motion with an amended motion listed below it.
Okay. Can we do that, please?
Because it had been moved and seconded, it's council's motion, it's not even mine.
Can we procedurally withdraw the motion?
Let's just...
Not once council...
No.
Well, we
not once I've opened debate. That's... Yeah.
Okay. So the amendment is exactly the same motion with the addition of the number 1, Chairman, for the obvious reason.
So
Taking notes, Shelley.
we've got that. Yeah. Taking notes, Councillor Curtis. We introduced changes before. Okay, so we have an amended motion moved by Councillor Peter Young. Councillor Vorster indicated a desire to second. Everyone's comfortable with where we're at now? Okay. So, given we were already into debate on the other one, Councillor Peter Young, do you have a very short opening?
I think that the nature of the changes that the state government is seeking to introduce and the material that they've provided to support that and to ascertain council's genuine response on behalf of its community is seriously deficient, and I think we should be noting that, and that's the reason for the desired inclusion. Thanks, Chairman, for accommodating.
Absolutely agree. Very good contribution. Councillor Vorster, were you looking to contribute on this one?
No.
Anyone else looking to speak to this item at this time? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you. It's my understanding that housing supply, population targets are some of the most sensitive concerns for our community. And I do also want to stress the shocking state of our state government asking us to rush this through. I'll also note that we are fortunate that we are a large council. We have a large resources of professional planners who had to put all hands on deck to create something. This has been put not only on us, but every South East Queensland council who do not have the same resources we have. So I just want to put that out there too, that this is a real concern for our whole area. We have, over the last few years, consistently been making requests on infrastructure charges and social housing targets so we could be considered somewhere along the lines of Brisbane or other areas that we're starting to meet those targets. Not only are we asked to do this now, but we're asked to do it without them answering those questions that we've been asking for years. We don't have the data. I find it quite interesting that in here it says the state government, this is what the state government is committed to. We've got one line in this document about what the state government's committed to. The state government remains committed to the completion of this review and development by the end of 2023. They're not committed to a good review. They're not committed to full consultation. They are just committed to it being finished by the end of 2023. There is nothing more concerning to our community than what happens with population and housing targets over the next 20 years, and it's a real slap in the face to council and to residents that the state government have done it in this way. Thank you.
Was there anyone else looking to contribute? So I'm not possibly going to go quite as strong as Councillor Patterson, but to echo part of her comments, that this was a knee-jerk reaction by the state government to a lot of pressure around housing supply and housing affordability. By setting these timeframes and going about it this path, they have completely lost the opportunity to genuinely work with local governments in a consultative way to achieve what is every level of government's goal, to increase housing supply and to bring about more affordability. It is very disappointing, and I've heard several points today about it raises concerns when we are so close to launching into a city plan review that relies upon SEQ documents to have that there. So I agree with all the committee comments and thank you for those contributions. I appreciate the couple of additions in regards to the Helensvale-Coomera cluster and to the Robina economic cluster as well. Councillor Peter Young, did you wish to close on this item?
Sorry, Chair, it's me who closes.
That's true.
Sorry, yeah. Forgive me, Councillor Gates, you close.
Thank you, and I would like to close because despite the short time frame and the obvious difficulties presented to officers in providing guidance to us and a response, and the difficulties for our wider residential community, I do recognise that there is an element of good that the state has wished to achieve in fast-tracking the review. What I think is missing that hasn't been discussed today is providing local government with the necessary levers to actually help in the space which is that of major concern, which is housing supply and social housing. Because as we all know, we don't actually deliver housing supply in terms of being able to construct it. The state has the responsibility for delivering social housing, and we know by what's before us that we're really, really short in this city on that supply. And the development sector has to deliver affordable housing, and we need help at a local government level to enable us to fast-track applications for affordable housing. And I think that's what's been missing. It has been raised at the SEQ Planning Committee meetings that we need additional levers. So I hope that feedback gets through and that something comes through with the final plan after the submissions. It's something that I overlooked checking today to see if we've made that part of our submission, that we would like to see additional levers. So maybe that's something the officers can consider if it's not already there prior to full council. But I was reluctant to move the amendment due to my participation at the SEQ level, but I will support the amendment.
Thank you for the close, Councillor Gates. So we will take the vote on the amended motion. All those in favour? Sorry, I'm going to take that again. Councillor Young, you can come back in and we'll take that vote again. So all those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Very good. So that is item 6.7. Oh, do we have to go back and deal with the other one, do we? Yep. Okay.
So now Peter opens.
Councillor Young opens and closes, everything there. And we vote on that motion as well? Okay. So is everyone clear? We're voting on the original one now? On the amended. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go again. So all those in favour? Against? Carried unanimous. Okay. So that's 6.7. Thank you very much, officers. Councillors, we have 3 GBIs to get through. It is 12:24 and we will be out of here by 12:30. So if we can bring up the first general business item. We dealt with 7.1 as starred. Okay, so, yep. So, Councillor, can I check with you, Councillor Vorster? Do you have to raise a conflict when a GBI is being raised?
Yep.
You do, okay.
So, sorry, I need to do a DCOI, declarable conflict.
Yeah.
I'll just walk across.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what are you doing? What are we doing? While you're waiting for that chair, I'll just keep in mind. It's hard to every single person. That's well tonight. Yeah, if I could be in bed by 9:30 and asleep, I'll be bringing that home personal front. No, I've got an Australian Institute Company Directors meeting before that, and I'm heading down to Swelling.
Councillor Vorster, your DCOI.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. So I'm making a declarable conflict of interest declaration, which I foreshadowed, I think, at our last round. Your general business item proposes an investigation into the planning treatment of car sharing schemes. A friend of mine, Brendan Wolfe, represents a car sharing operator outbound, and while your general business item doesn't propose any policy changes, that business might be affected by a future decision. And on that basis, I feel as I'm dealing with a declarable conflict of interest, probably a voluntary one. I'm seeking to participate on the basis that this is minor and remote.
Very good. I'm happy to move a procedural motion that Councillor Vorster may participate in the decision despite the councillor's conflict of interest, because Councillor Vorster's interest is remote and the remote and minor wording that we used before, please. Very good. We'll just let it come up. Councillor Peter Young is the seconder. And we just got to make sure we get the name in there first before we take the vote. Different thing. Okay, so we have the wordings, moved by me, seconded Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Gates, Councillor Curtis, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor Gail O'Neill, and Councillor Vorster did not vote. That's that taken care of, so we can go back to the GBI item itself.
I didn't vote on the on my conflict. So my apologies. We've moved to that. I'm very supportive.
Okay,
thank you.
So
in the affirmative.
I did intend to raise this GBI at the last committee, but we were running well into the next committee. So it's on the back of that at last committee we had 3 different items that had car share schemes proposed under different land uses, different locations, different arrangements. It was clear from that as part of a city plan update where car parking will be looked at, that we should look at car share in more depth to understand how it's used in other local governments, how it's used in other cities, to hopefully inform a better outcome in next city plan. So that's GBI item 1. I will take a seconder. So Councillor Peter Young seconds that one, and that's moved by me. All those in favour of that GBI? Carried unanimous. (8.2) is a proposed GBI from Councillor Peter Young. Councillor Young, could you very quickly bring us up to speed on where this has come from?
Absolutely. Thanks, Chairman. The wording's in front of us and I've handed it out, but the wording on the screen is slightly different in that it includes a date by which the report should come to us, which is December this year. So it's come to my attention that when people seek to create domestic violence accommodation, there are limitations on what council can do. In fact, I don't think we can even ask for a planning application or any assessment, and that's governed by state regulation, and that's wise. But we do apply infrastructure charges, and I think that that's an anomaly. And so this report that we would seek will address that and any provisions that we might put around that in a careful framework to enable infrastructure charges not to be applied at the time of creation of domestic violence, but perhaps at the time when they cease to operate on a particular property or whatever other framework that officers come up with.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to make sure that we're talking about those that are state approved.
So can I suggest, in the discussion that occurred around this yesterday, because Councillor Young brought this up on the back of the infrastructure charges piece that we've moved through committee today,
there's that question, there's the question about if it should be not-for-profit or and otherwise. All of those questions were raised yesterday in the briefing and will all be brought up in the report. It's the reason why I encouraged Councillor Peter Young not to attempt to adjust the infrastructure charges recommendation we dealt with today, that I wanted a GBI instead, so that we've got a report back that could look at all those issues, because there are other things involved in this.
Exactly.
So it will look at that. It will look at who it's applied to in terms of not-for-profit or those kind of arrangements. It's a much bigger piece to have a look at.
Yeah, because there'll be a lot of anomalies that go there in that field, I know.
And we want to make sure through a report that we don't allow unintended consequences, that we solve one problem but create others.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to go down this path.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Vorse, did you have a question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I fully support the need for us to assist the most vulnerable in our community and those who are victims of domestic and family violence. I think we owe a special obligation to, particularly because Council has entered that fray. I know Councillor Tozer has a program running in his own division. The city's aligned with the White Ribbon Foundation and so on and so forth. So I'm very, very supportive of this. My question is, though, through you to Councillor Young, whether it is necessary to include the last section of the GBI, and that is the part that follows benefit developments. So in other words, do we need to include such as temporary rooming accommodation for domestic violence refuges? And I ask that because I worry that other community organisations serving different community needs might seek from each of us a GB at committee that's relevant to their needs. What surf clubs next? Is it, animal refuges? What is it? And I just wonder whether if we delete that last part, we might receive from city officers a more holistic examination around forgiving infrastructure fees that could look at other community uses as well, so that if a sector of our community approaches us, we can say, well, we're actually looking at this holistically and we will come to you with an outcome. Whereas if we suggest that it's limited to DV, then I think there'll be a lot of pressure on us moving forward to look at other uses. So my question through you, Mr. Councillor Young.
Councillor, if you wouldn't mind, maybe Nick, you might need your assistance here with it. There was some specific reasons officers were keen just to deal with this at this stage, because there is that state regulation that provides exemptions that we can't assess development in this space.
Yes.
I absolutely understand your intent. I'm just worried that what officers were looking to hope to clean up with this GBI item and getting some clarity in the infrastructure charges policy might get lost and we might push out timeframes.
So I suppose, let me ask you this, Mr. Chairman. Is the intent of the GBI to deal with domestic violence refuges only?
So it was, in that because of that exemption under the state regulations, our infrastructure charges policy doesn't reflect that exemption the way that it should. So by doing this, it was to enable our infrastructure charges policy to be adjusted.
For domestic violence refuges?
Because of that state regulation that doesn't allow us to have assessment.
And this is what's confusing me, because the GBI says in relation to potential exemption of infrastructure charges that could apply to community benefit developments. Yep. So I take it to be all community benefit developments with an example of DV refuges. So refuges?
Was there, could you put some input here, but I think there were specifics around this wording, and I just want to make sure that before we suggest any changes that we don't remove the original intent.
I'm sure it's highly technical.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think we don't want to impose infrastructure charges on community type developments that are going to impact those developments from going ahead. So I don't have a problem with it being more broader than just domestic violence refuges.
Councillor Gates, I'm going to come to you for your input as Deputy Chair on this one. Would you see an issue if we remove that, had a more broad report?
No, I don't believe there's an issue as long as the officers are clear in the intent of why this has been raised. And I'm sure that they are, given the discussions yesterday and today. And as long as Councillor Young is happy, if we just put a full stop after developments, we'll get a pretty thorough report.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you.
All committee members are comfortable with that, appreciating it's your GBI, Councillor Young, but I just want to make sure that we still deliver what you were seeking to deliver, but if there's a broader piece to do, then that's a good outcome.
And I'm happy to second that if you need a second.
Very good. So let's go with that. So that item is moved by Councillor Peter Young, seconded by Councillor Vorster. I'm going to go straight to a vote on it. So all those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Councillor Peter Young, your second GBI.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll try to be brief.
It's all right.
I've handed out to each of the councillors, except for yourself, a page that was prepared for me by Mr. Roger Sharp, and it outlines the background to it all. That's a bit long-winded, but I'm grateful to. Bottom of the page there with a little mark against it. I'd prefer to speak to this in closed session, Chairman, because of the nature of the advice that we've received from Roger here, and that's before us in print.
So I'm not going to go to closed for it because it's about a GBI, not about the application that's been approved. So we need to keep the two separate. The GBI is about looking forward, not if you're getting out there. So if you can talk to it about what we're looking to achieve in the future through your GBI instead of what has been approved or is in the assessment process, I think it'd be a better outcome.
Okay, so at this point in time, I'll just say there was a proposal for a very large warehouse, 10,000 square metres next to a residential estate, which is built for retirees. And it was going through the fast track process, and it just astonished me that it could get to there. And that we would have to deal with it under that regime. And so the objective here is that officers will evaluate how we might firm up the constraints and considerations in the assessment of these sorts of developments in the future. That's it.
So just to your point, thank you for that, Councillor Peter Young. Councillor Gates, I did have a more in-depth conversation with Roger and Mick about this one, and with Catherine as well, given it would be strategic planning that needs to look at this. There was an acceptance from all of them that this was a reasonable request and that we're not looking at, this isn't a broad-scale policy piece, it's probably only half a dozen sites in the city that this is a possible problem, but they agreed that it was a worthwhile piece of work to do to maybe avoid some unintended consequences other sites.
I'm more than happy to support it. I know the issues associated with residential alongside these sorts of...
Thought you might. So I'm going to take that as Councillor Gates as a seconder. So all in favour of that general business item? That's carried unanimous. I'm not going to accept any other items. Take it as that. He's not here. What's the point? Councillors... Seconder was Councillor Gates. Yep, it's all right. So I think as you are all aware now, this will be Nick's last committee meeting with us before Alicia Swain returns to the head of planning. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Nick for his time in the role and probably apologise for some of the headaches I've caused him since taking over. But thank you, Nick, for your contribution, and we look forward to that further contribution with you remaining with the city. I wanted to thank all councillors today. We got stuck into a couple of items and had some very interesting debate and made some positive changes. Councillor Tozer, thank you for your participation today and strong representation of your community. Councillor Gates and Councillor Owen-Jones for your contribution to the South and the North. I really appreciate that a hell of a lot. You were looking to contribute? Come on.
Look, I just wanted to echo your comments about Nick Maguire. And I wanted to share with the rest of the committee that I was in a briefing in the Mayor's office this week where Nick made an incredible contribution for someone who had previously not been in this role. Nick's focus is obviously economic development, and we are so lucky to have him returning to that space, I believe. But for someone to take hold of this role, which is huge in our city, and to adapt so well and so effectively and efficiently, Nick, I think we all value it greatly. So thank you, and all the very best for the future. Thank you.
And final thanks today, as always, to our amazing support staff. We will one of these days get all our declarations in order beforehand, I promise. 12:44, that's the end of Planning Committee for today.